Thanks for coming back. We will reconvene this morning, starting with a roll
This
call.
meeting is being recorded.
Ms. Buller,
Present and accounted for.
Dr. Bradbury,
Here.
Ms. Key,
Here.
Ms. Laredo,
Here.
Ms. Prado,
Here.
Dr. Felicito,
Here.
Dr. Nolan. Doesn't look like she's joined us yet. Dr. Nunez,
Here.
we have a quorum.
Very good. The next item on our agenda is the wonderful world of administrative procedural manuals. Who
All right,
is
so
that?
members, in front of you is the updated proposed updates to the Administrative Procedures Manual. It's always good to review this every couple of years to make sure it's still up to date and doesn't need to be revised. So we did, after redoing it, found a number of things that we would like to improve upon. The first one is just the minor and technical changes that we made. We updated the manual revision date and made other non-substantive changes. We added a new veterinary student liaison section pursuant to the board strategic plan discussion. This was to be able to have 2 student liaisons, one from each California school, participate in the board meeting. And so we added a section there as well. For the third one, we added MDC member authority to the election of officers section in accordance with current MDC election practice. And you'll see that it was a minor change. We just incorporated that into where we talk about elections for the normal board. We added a provision regarding public disclosure of written communications between a board and MDC member and the public. We clarified conflict of interest provisions, updated the directory of licensees section to align with BPC section 27 regarding the posting requirement. We eliminated an unnecessary section related to license discipline in another state. We added new ex parte communication section to clarify communications between board members and parties to a pending enforcement action. And we added to the reference list the DCA incompatible work activities policy, since that policy is discussed under the conflict of interest provisions. So with that, do you have any questions or would like to discuss any of the updates? Kathy, I see your hand up.
I had 2 questions. One on page, and thank you. I think it looks great, and it sure does incorporate the things, particularly the student liaisons that we've been discussing, which I'm very excited about because I think it'll be very, very helpful. On page 18, well, maybe it's 19. There's 2 page numbers. It's under Association Membership, Chapter 8.
Okay.
Okay. You say, I think you mean AAVSB. At the very last reference, you say AAVSN.
Yep, we can make that change. And it looks like that it has been like that for a while. So we'll update that.
Okay, clearly,
you.
never read it. I hadn't read it recently, sorry. Then I had another question on page 23/24, the new ex parte communications. And I think I saw it referenced somewhere else, but in the second paragraph, beginning with occasionally, it says they should reseal the documents and send them to the executive board. Since so much is by by email, should we say, do you use a different word like close the, I don't know, reseal? I get that if it's a piece of mail, but.
Right.
Tara,
Tara, what are your thoughts on this? Because the members do get contacted quite frequently, more so now, I think, than in the past with direct email communications rather than mail, although we know that mail occurs as well. What do you think, Tara?
I think we could probably make a clarification that they should reseal, let's see, any hard copy documents and send or forward electronic communications.
If I can just interrupt, the moderator, Dr. Nolan, says she can't get in. She's knocking at the front door. If you can-
Yes,
you can check that.
I'm sending her a chat message now to explain to her what's happening.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
I thought, Tara, yesterday in something else we read, I don't even remember where it was, it had some other description for this about they should immediately, stop reading, close the document and forward, or I don't know, some other language.
You could be referring to a recent email that was sent out to all members about communications from respondents, but it is, that language is in there as well when you look at if the communication is written, the board members should only read it far enough to determine the nature of the communication and then send it to me. Is that the language that you're looking at?
Yes, that's right, Jessica. I just read it because you had just sent it out a couple of days ago. Got it.
Okay, so can we, do you want to bring up the text on page 23 of the admin manual, which is page 24 of the meeting materials, so that we can
Let me
make a tweak?
Give me a second. I'll pull up the actual the Word document so we can make the tweak live. 1 second.
Jessica, did you want the presenter role?
Yes, please. As soon as this document comes up for me. I remember my computer is not wanting to cooperate this morning. There we go. No, that's the wrong one. It's not, it won't open for me. Tara, do you have the Word version on your?
I'm not logged in to this meeting on my work computer, so I'm not able to.
So this is the moderator. I am going to, it's in the packet that's up on the website, correct?
Yeah, that's not the issue. The issue is I'm trying to pull up the Word document so I can so they can see the changes that I make. But the Word
gotcha.
is not working. Word is not working for me this morning. I just got an error message that it's not opening.
Tara, are you doing official state business on your personal email?
No.
Okay,
No.
just checking.
I access the internet, and I click on the board's meeting agenda, and I access WebEx on my personal computer, but I do not do any state business on my personal computer.
Okay, all right, just checking.
Tara, could you just read to us your changes to us all, and we could all just handwrite it down and make the.
Okay.
That makes sense, Mark?
Yeah.
Without the text.
All right. So.
Yeah. We all have the text.
Right, so, first off, were we able to get Dr. Nolan connected?
I don't think I see her on the chat.
She's logging back in. I could not promote her as a panelist with the way she had joined, so she's logging back in.
Okay. All right, so I'm on page 23 of the admin manual, or page 24 of agenda item 12. And on this page, you'll see text in blue, which is in the middle of the page, ex parte communications. I'm looking at the second paragraph, last sentence, that begins with, once the board member realizes it is from a person against whom an action is pending, they should reseal, and I'm suggesting to delete the word the and insert any hard copy, and then we'll continue in the sentence with documents, and send, and then insert or forward electronic communications, strike them to the executive officer for handling. So I'm going to read that whole sentence with the modifications. Once the board member realizes it is from a person against whom an action is pending, they should reseal any hard copy documents and send or forward electronic communications to the executive officer for handling.
That sounds good and makes sense.
Okay, so that change is to accommodate either hard copy documents received by mail or emails submitted to the board members. Okay, Jessica, do you want to continue, or Ms. Bowler, did you have more comments?
I did not. Those are my only things for that. Thank you.
All right, do any other members have any questions or edit to the document?
Since this is a change to our policy manual, if we vote on it, it becomes it becomes our policy. It doesn't have to go to legal counsel or all that regulatory stuff. It's
Right,
done.
no, this is just board policy, so we just need a motion to approve it, and then it'll be effective.
Okay, so we could potentially have a student liaison by the next meeting.
That is my goal.
Okay, cool.
Well, I could make a motion, but we still don't have Jamie, right? Who also may have changes, but probably, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for her to rejoin.
Perhaps, members, we can go on to the next agenda item, and once she joins, then we can take a vote and see if she has any other edits to it.
That's fine. The next agenda item is me, I believe. Yes, the board president report. It's going to be a short report. There wasn't lots of travel to distant lands or anything like that. Jessica and I continue to have our weekly meetings, and it definitely helps me keep up to date on everything that's going on up in Sacramento. I don't know how Jessica does it, because she also does monthly calls with board members, and she truly is a Wonder Woman. One of the nice things about the weekly meetings is that particularly legislation is always changing in Sacramento, and some of those meetings, Kathy's on the call to serve as the third wing of the executive committee. And most of the time, if there's some comments or letters or opinions that we have on changes to legislations, that's the opportunity where we can do it and we can really stay on top of things. As I mentioned yesterday, we did have a onboarding meeting with Judy Key, our new public member, and had a very nice discussion with her. I think it was about an hour. She is a very enthusiastic board member. She read everything we sent her, including our sunset report and responses. And I think she's even completed all the training. Ethics. I'm not sure if she's done driver's education yet, defensive driving or whatnot, but that alone impressed me tremendously. There was a CVMA Board of Governors meeting June 17th. Jessica, of course, did a tremendous job presenting an update, even though she was, I think, technically on holiday, on vacation or away from the office at that time. So thank you for that. And I was there just to smile and look good. And the final thing I want to say is I want to thank all the members of the staff for doing such a tremendous job over the last year. If there was any misinterpretation of what was written in the minutes with the pay cut, my intention was to say that you have stood by this board, and I'm grateful for that. You not only worked under strenuous circumstances and decreased pay, but you really excelled in your duties, gone above and beyond what is in the job description, always looking for ways to make things more efficient and make sure that extra spending isn't done. And I'm impressed tremendously by the hard work you do. You're all very, very talented people. And that's my report. And Dr. Nolan is on. She's here. Any questions for me from staff members?
Dr. Nunez, I did finish the defensive driving.
You did. Wow.
I have all my certificates.
Amazing. That's amazing. Good job. Any questions from the public? Oh, I see a hand raised. Yes, Dr. Bradbury.
This isn't really a question for you, Dr. Nunez. I'm sorry. I just I never got to say welcome to our newest member, and I am excited to have you on the board. So I just never felt a good place to say that. So welcome.
Thank you.
And it looks like public comment Q&A box is being opened.
It is. I've opened the Q&A panel. If you'd like to make a comment on today's item of the President's Report, please click on the Q&A icon on your screen, which is a question mark inside of a square. Type comment, or I would like to make a comment, into the text field and submit that to all panelists. And just as a reminder for today's meeting, we will be taking comments in the order that they are received, and there will be a 3-minute limit on the comments. I will be providing 30-second reminders when your time's about to expire. And when it expires, I will mute your microphone and move on to the next commenter. And with that, I'm not seeing any requests for comment. Would you like me to close the panel?
Yes, please.
It is closed.
One final thing I would like to say to the Department of Consumer Affairs. I am definitely honored and enthusiastic about continuing to serve this grace period in service to the board. I am passionate about my profession, and thank you for the privilege of serving. And with that, we will go back to our policy manual. Dr. Nolan, we presented the changes to the policy manual and had made some changes to the ex parte section on page 23, 24. And that's where we're at. And the changes, if you can, do you have the policy manual in front of you? Page 23?
And I apologize, I had some technical difficulties that I've never had before, so I switched computers. I don't know what
Okay.
was going
Looks
on.
like it's working now, so it should be on the screen.
Yeah,
Are the changes there already?
yep.
No, this is the moderator. I don't have the ability to scribe while moderating because if I share my screen to do that, I can't see anything else in the WebEx. So this is just what's in the materials now.
Okay, so Tara, would you like to just read once again for Dr. Nolan the changes we made to that section, please?
Okay, well, first I want to make a note that on page 18 of the admin manual, which is page 19 of agenda item 12, Ms. Bowler made a correction to the AAVSB section to change the second to the last line from the annual AAVSN to be AAVSB. So that was a minor technical change. And then on page 23 of the manual, page 24 of the meeting materials, under ex parte communications, second paragraph, last sentence, once the board member realizes it is from a person against whom an action is pending, they should reseal. We're going to strike the word the and insert any hard copy, and then continue the sentence to say documents and send, and then we're going to strike the word them and insert or forward electronic communications. I'm going to read the whole sentence now with the revisions. Once the board member realizes it is from a person against whom an action is pending, they should reseal any hard copy documents and send or forward electronic communications to the executive officer for handling. Dr. Nolan, did you have any suggested revisions or comments on the changes?
No, I think I'm fine. Thanks.
Okay, at this point, I guess maybe you could open it up for public comment.
Okay.
Can we get a motion first? A motion to approve before public comment?
Move to approve with the amendments as amended today.
I'll second. This is Christina.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the administrative policy manual with amendments. And if there are no further questions from the board, we can open up for public comments, please.
This is the moderator. We've opened the Q&A panel. If you'd like to make a comment on this item, please click on the Q&A icon on your screen, type comment into the text field, and submit that to all panelists. Our first comment comes from Nancy Ehrlich. Nancy, your line is open and you will have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a question about the veterinary student liaisons. This is the first I've heard of this program. I think it's an excellent idea, but I wonder why you're limiting it to veterinary students and not registered veterinary technician students as well, since they need to be educated on statutes and regulations that impact the profession as well.
Well, I completely agree with you. I think that it's a great concept. I I'm trying to think how many RVT schools there are, and if there was a representative from each school, that would be quite a large desk that we would be sitting at. We do have our RVT representative on the board, Jennifer, so I will have you comment on that question.
This is Tara, and I just want to remind everyone that we're receiving public comments, but we're not necessarily engaging. Yeah. So let's receive all the public comments, and then if the board members want to discuss the comments that have been made, you can do so at that time.
Yep, sure.
And this is the moderator. We don't have any other requests for comment at this time. Would you like me to close the panel?
Yes, please.
It is closed.
All right, we've the motion has been made and seconded. The members of the public have been given the opportunity to make comments. Are there any comments or questions from members of the board? Yes. Dr. Nolan.
Sorry, I've been a little discombobulated this morning. I did find my notes, and I don't know if you've talked about it or not. And it's not a big issue. It doesn't have to do with the student liaisons, but it talked about when we actually go ahead and let me find the page. Sorry, that talked about reappoint or actually advertising for members of the MDC. We talk about having to do it at least starting a year in advance, and I think we should say something about if possible, because it's sometimes not possible to do that, and but maybe that's too tiny of a little thing. I don't know. And I'm trying to find. Tara probably can grab it before me. Let's see.
I think it's on page 17, 18. At the very sort of recruitment efforts.
Yeah, I think that's it.
For upcoming vacancies shall begin at least 12 months prior. So could say
should instead of shall, because it's not always able. We're not always able to do that.
I liked the when possible or if possible.
Something like that.
So the proposed changes, recruitment efforts for upcoming vacancies on the MDC shall begin at least 12 months prior to the expiration of said term, if possible.
Yeah, something like that. And then I also wondered if there should be some sort of, I hate to say the word, deadline, but sometimes when vet school gets started and then things get rolling, and it would be good if we would try to give them, the vet schools, a little more guidance about the time frame of selecting a student. You say the beginning of the school year, but that can be pretty vague. And maybe that's too prescriptive, but maybe just give them some guidance, like, within preferably within the first month of the, term or something like that. Because if they don't get on the stick, they're going to miss the October meeting.
So now you're talking about the student liaison?
Yeah, right. Okay. And again, I don't also want to tie their hands. I feel like it's really, it's exciting to have the students participate, but I just think we might mention something about the meetings change, but we do almost always have a meeting in the fall, right? So if we could say something about, if possible, before the fall board meeting or something like that.
Okay, and that just so you know, that timeline, it came after discussions with both of the schools of when the best time would be to have that appointment, and so that was the suggestion that they made. But we can maybe add another if possible.
Prior to the fall meeting, or prior to the yeah.
So that doesn't need to be in the policy manual. That just needs to be directions to the deans.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to work with them on a regular basis to make sure that we provide as much guidance as possible. But I mean, if you'd like, we can add it in there.
No, I don't think it's necessary. I just think I do know, having some experience with school terms and, things, that getting the students organized and then going through the process and trying to make it a fair and open process takes time. And if they're starting in September, I think they start in August, but so, anyway, it can be a little, so just kind of making sure that they understand that timing is important is all.
Yeah, and I think that from my understanding that there's other positions that the school elects. I think this is the same time that the students are electing their representative for the CVMA Board of Governors. And so we wanted to follow that process to make it as easy as possible for the students. And so that's just what we put in there. But I mean, I think we can be flexible with the schools. We don't want to put any undue burdens on them. But I think that they're pretty excited about this, adding them.
Yeah, I totally agree about, I don't want to make it any very prescriptive, but I just want to make sure that they are aware that, there's a time frame.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need to put any language about the terms? Are these 1-year terms? I don't see any language about that. I think the CVMA representatives are 1-year terms, aren't they? Because there's a certain year where they have the most time to do it. Like senior students wouldn't be able to do it. But I think they're juniors when they do it in CVMA.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should actually have that in here, probably, a term.
I don't know if we have the term, but we do say that it has to be elected by their respective school in the fall at the beginning of each school year. So if they're electing each school year, it's up to the school to determine the students who they want, but it would be a annual thing.
Okay, so they can send the same person or send someone different at their discretion then?
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Bradbury?
I do think it might make sense to at least just put that in here since this is a manual, and like maybe the board president may annually appoint veterinary student liaisons, the first line, to just clarify that it is a 1-year thing. Because this is, who knows as this grows, and I don't know. I like the idea of having it being stated in there.
So the proposed change is that the board president may annually appoint. And I assume that may means that we don't have to, which is fine. Okay, so are there any other, I see Dr. Nolan's hand is still up.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I thought that's what it said, Christina. Am I reading it wrong? I thought it said the board president may appoint veterinary student liaisons.
Well, it does say that, but
I was saying maybe we should add annually in front of that, may annually appoint, so that it is clear that it's a year term, so every year.
Oh, yeah, I don't know, that would be a Tara question. I do think that there may be instances where a student does such an exemplary job, they want them to continue. So I would like to leave it up to the schools to kind of decide if they want it to be a 1-year term or.
well, I don't think that proposed change would disallow that.
Because the students are coming from the schools.
Right.
This is Tara. This is going to have to work in conjunction with the second paragraph, the last sentence. The veterinary student liaison must be elected by their respective school in the fall at the beginning of each school year. So at that point, they're potentially the school itself is, maybe reappointing the same person. And then that way there is an annual review at least.
Yeah, so Jessica was implying that it's already implied that it's an annual term with the last line in paragraph 2. And If we feel
Right.
that that's sufficient to imply that it's a one-year term, then we may not need to add the annual to the first sentence. Annually to the first sentence.
That's fine with me.
We always nitpick the first item on the agenda when we're the most awake. So let's not put the word in annually, because I believe it's implied in the last sentence of the second paragraph. Any other questions? Christina Bradbury's hand is up. Dr. Bradbury, did you forget to put it down?
No, when we're done with this, I did want to hear from Jennifer about the comment.
I had a little something about that on my RVT report. So I'm going to wait until then, but I have some comments also. But yeah, I agree with the comment that there are 2 veterinary schools, there are countless RVT schools, and there are different types of schools. There are trade schools, there are private schools, there are colleges, there are alternate routes, there are online schools. So I did notice in the manual that it says that the veterinary student liaisons are not entitled to travel and any kind of funding like that. So I have an idea that I'll go over in my report, but I agree. I had the same thought as Nancy, is why aren't we included in this? But it doesn't seem like it would be feasible to have every single school represented. We would have 5-day meetings at that point. So.
We won't have enough chairs.
Well, members, if you recall when this came up during the strategic planning session, that issue also came up of what do we do with the RVT schools? And I think at the time we wanted to make sure that we can start with the veterinary student liaisons and then still look at maybe at a later date or try to hash out how we could do it for the RVT schools. So I don't think the intent was ever to leave them out. It was how do we do that? And so perhaps what we could do is move forward on this to approve it, but then work with Carpta and Jennifer to figure out how we can get a student liaison representation from the RVT program.
Dr. Bradbury?
No, that was it. I wanted to address it and not ignore it before we finish this conversation. Thank you.
She likes to ask me questions before I've finished my coffee.
Sorry.
So there was one change we made after public comment.
I don't think so, Mark. We talked all about this. Oh, maybe.
Really
It's on page 17.
Oh, right. The timing, when possible, right.
Yeah, so do we have to go back to public comment because of that?
Well, we have to first make sure that Kathy and Dr. Bradbury are okay with those to amend the motion to include those amendments.
Kathy has a thumbs up. There's 2 thumbs up. All right, so they're okay. And so now let's open public comment back up.
This is the moderator. We've again opened the public comment period for this item. If you'd like to make one final comment, you can click on the Q&A icon on your screen, type comment into the text field, and submit that to all panelists. And not seeing any requests, would you like me to close the panel?
Yes, please.
It is closed.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded to accept the changes to the administrative policy manual with modifications. Members of the public have been given the opportunity to comment, so if there are no further questions from the board, we can call for the vote.
Ms. Bullard?
Aye.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Ms. Key?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Dr. Solocito?
Yes.
Dr. Nolan?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right, and thank you to the board staff that worked on bringing this policy manual up to date. And Dr. Bradbury, your hand is still up. Very good. And we can now move on to agenda item 14, the registered veterinary technician report. Jennifer Laredo.
And good morning again, everyone. First thing I want to do is congratulate all of the new RVTs. I know that the VTNE was just offered over the summer. I'm seeing a lot of students who are very excited to have passed. So congratulations, welcome. This is probably the busiest time in veterinary medicine for every single veterinary hospital. And I know that those new RVTs are much needed. So welcome, guys. I do want to remind all of the support staff, not just the RVTs, but the veterinary assistants as well, to practice self-care. We are seeing a lot of the heavy workloads, the burnout. I know that there have been clients that are very frustrated and they're being abusive toward the staff. We're seeing a lot of posts, not one more vet, the depression rates are up and the suicide rates. I don't think anybody intends to not include the RVTs and the veterinary support staff in that. So everybody, please practice self-care, take care of yourselves. I know that the workload is heavy. I myself have been waiting 6 weeks to see a specialist for my pet. Just do your best to take care of yourselves. Don't feel obligated to take those extra shifts. Get your sleep, eat and drink and be merry. And by drink, I mean water. Make sure you're hydrating. It's summer. It's very hot out there. So take care of yourself, everyone. Just a bit of news in the RVT world, not in California, but in Montana, they recently passed a licensure bill for veterinary technicians. Montana was one of the states that did not have any licensing and qualification guidelines for veterinary technicians, so that recently changed. So that's a move in the right direction. Great job on that, Montana. Another thing that I'm just kind of seeing in the RVT world that I don't know that there's anything we can do about it, but I do want to bring it up to everybody's attention. With the burnout and the workload, I'm seeing a lot of RVT programs lose their program directors. And there's been quite a bit of turnover. I sit on 4 advisory committees for RVT programs, and I've seen 2 of them very recently lose their directors. One program is due for their AVMA site visit this coming fall, and they just lost their director. So that's an issue because we are trying to get more RVTs out in the field. We know that the RVT programs are impacted. Students are having a hard time getting their classes. Not having directors is going to create even more of an issue. So I do want to bring that to everybody's attention. There are plenty of job opportunities. The last advisory meeting I was at, there was somebody, I think from Mark's organization, who was looking for RVTs, looking for jobs, and basically said, send me a resume, I'll have you a job tomorrow. She was not joking. There is such a high demand for RVTs right now. I just want to make sure that everybody's telling everybody they know, if you're looking for employment, we can find you some. I mean, there are plenty of opportunities out there. Another issue that I just wanted to bring up, I have mentioned it before, and I don't know that this is something we'll have an answer for today, but with the possibility of going back to in-person meetings and the travel, we have seen that with the webcasting and the remote meetings, we're seeing a lot more public participation. So I do want to try to explore the options of continuing that, even if we do go back to in-person meetings. Again, especially in light of the next topic with the student liaisons, there will be not only students but a lot of the public who just can't travel, and especially with our before COVID, when our meetings would move around California, it's just not always possible to travel. So I would like to, at the very least, have the option of maybe a hybrid remote and in-person meetings just to increase participation. I think it's really helpful to hear from the public, especially being a public protection agency. So I would like to explore that. And I know that there have been a lot of cost savings, as I've heard, from not traveling. So we do have the technical difficulties that we can't really control, but it would be nice to have that option available for everybody who doesn't have the resources to travel. The next thing on my list, I'm going to skip a little bit, is the shelter medicine access issue. I don't want that to fall off of our radar. I know that that's something that we had talked about. As far as the shelter medicine access, we know that that's not something that we can fix, but the reason that impacts RVTs is we do have shelters that have maybe an RVT and not a veterinarian. So there are a lot of gray areas on what can be done, and we're not trying to overstep or allow RVTs to practice veterinary medicine when they're not veterinarians, but we are trying to provide care for the animals that are in shelters. And we know that that has been a very hot topic issue. So I would like to have a subcommittee at some point, maybe even deferred to the MDC on some things that can be done for that. I know that in shelter medicine, there is an exemption for an RVT to be able to purchase controlled substances for euthanasia if there is no veterinarian. Maybe that's something that we can play off of to try to increase options for care for animals. I don't really know. I don't have the answer here, but I would like a group of people at some point to explore that, because we know that that issue is not going away. There continues to be a need for care for shelters. Next topic. We did hear that there was a request for an additional RVT on the board. I did want to address that and maybe get some discussion going among the board. I absolutely agree that we need another RVT on the board for several reasons. One, when we look at the numbers of licensees in DVMs in comparison to RVTs, we don't see that same ratio on the board. There's 4 DVMs on the board and 1 RVT. So I definitely agree, just for representation on the board. Additionally, we have an even number. We have 8. So an additional member would make 9, would, help with tiebreakers. Also, as the only RVT on the board, as much as I love to get my way, I really do, again, feel the need for diversity. We need somebody else. I mean, I worked in specialty medicine 15 years ago, so that's not the freshest thing in my mind. It would be nice to have another opinion on that. And also, it's not a woe is me moment, but as the RVT, all of the RVT issues default to me. I'm defaulted on the MDC, so all of the meetings are 3 days for me. It's a heavy workload. It would be nice to have that shared with more than one member. When there's a DVM issue, there's 4 DVMs that it can be kind of spread out to. So all of that defaults to the RVT member. And I had mentioned this when looking for RVT candidates for the MDC. The first thing, that people ask is, well, how much does it pay? And, it doesn't really pay much. It's more about making a difference. And then also, how much time does it take? And that's the hardest part, because it's 3 days, 4 times a year that you dedicate, and that doesn't include the subcommittees and the additional work that's done. So I think it's a wonderful idea. Again, the problem is finding an RVT who has that kind of time and, the resources to be able to take time off. I know that I've used a lot of my vacation and personal time the past 7 years making these meetings, so that's something that I just want to make sure that we're all aware of. I think it's a great idea to have another RVT on the board. Also, as I mentioned, there are plenty of job opportunities for any RVT who's looking for employment, but if you want to make a difference and not get paid, there are also plenty of opportunities for that. We do have an RVT position open on the MDC this year, so I believe, Jessica, we should start advertising for that soon. If it's not on the website already, it will be soon. And then also, my position on the VMB terms out next year, so there will be a position on the board, which again is default board and MDC. So there are those positions. NAVTA has a position for diversity and equity and inclusion committee. So if you want to make a difference in diversity, there's an opportunity there. The Heartworm Association has created a veterinary nurse position, and they're looking for candidates. So if any RVTs want to get involved, not necessarily for the money, just to try to make a difference, there are plenty of opportunities. But if you're looking for paid opportunities, there are plenty of those as well. And those are all of my topics. Does anybody have any questions for me? Any comments then?
Actually, I was talking, but my mute was on. Sorry. The subcommittee that you requested, you referred to it as Shelter Medicine Access. And just for clarification, I know we've had some discussion on minimum standards for shelter medicine. And also we've had some discussion on access to veterinary care. Shelter medicine access is kind of a hybrid term. You're referring to the fact of the challenges faced with the minimum standards in shelter medicines? That's
Yes. Yes. If we remember way back when we were in Sacramento, we had several representations from shelters come and speak to us about the lack of access to care. There were no veterinarians in their area. I think they were in the Central Valley. And that's they came to speak to us, but they're not the only ones who are experiencing that. And I think especially right now with the heavy workloads. So we had gone over, I don't want to go into the whole shelter
yeah,
regulations again, but I think that there are some opportunities for RVTs to be
sure.
able to provide more. And actually, I realized I skipped an agenda item also, or an item on my list. It was the issue of the veterinary student liaison. So as far as the RVT student liaison, as I had mentioned, there are a lot of schools and there are different types of schools. And with the RVTs, there's a difference because the veterinary students are typically in that school for a 4-year period. The RVTs, they could be in a 4-year program to become a technologist. They could be in a 2-year program. They could be taking one class at a time for 10 years. I've seen that happen as well. And I don't see how it's feasible to have every single program represented, but I had an idea that I wanted to get some feedback. Yes, I am the RVT member, but we have some RVT associations. I know we have CARVTA, we have NAVTA. Also, the CVMA has an RVT committee. So I thought maybe we could have, just as the liaisons are going to have basically maybe an agenda item where they discuss some issues, maybe we can have an RVT association that communicates with all of the different programs and the students and gets feedback, and then they could have a representative present at the board. If anybody has a better idea or something off of that, I'd love to hear about it. But I don't see how it's possible to get every single RVT program to have a student representative. I just don't see that happening. But anybody have ideas on that?
Dr. Bradbury.
Sorry, you sound like you're like Dr. Bradbury.
Dr.
Anyway,
Bradbury. Bueller.
oh God.
Bueller.
I was actually thinking the same thing, Jennifer, that maybe one of these associations potentially, how the veterinary schools are going to be electing a student. Maybe they can be, if they wanted to, the people that elect a student, and then they can just have the schools, send them applications and they can decide who. I think it would be nice if it were still a student, because that's the idea of trying to get outreach and sort of get them involved early on. But I was thinking that would be the only way I could see, because we can't do the added work of vetting people, or like whenever you took that on. I think that would be the only way I could see having a liaison for the RVTs. But I like that idea.
Yeah, and I thought maybe even a couple of liaisons, maybe one from a traditional 2-year AVMA approved program, maybe one from a 4-year program for the RVTGs, maybe an alternate route program, just representatives from each type of program, but they still have to have a way to communicate with all of the other programs, so it's not just one school being represented or one opinion.
Yeah, and I still like the idea. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, Jessica, is your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if there's a student association for the RVT programs at all that we could reach out to.
I don't know of one, but I'm sure CARVTA is on the call. I'm sure they would know if there's a student association.
Yeah, and we'll open it up to the public in a moment. But it sounds like we all probably can brainstorm about ideas. Like Jessica had mentioned, our strategic plan did discuss starting with student reps from the veterinary schools, which is moving forward. So thinking of innovative ways, especially if future meetings are going to be hybrid meetings with in-person and WebEx participants as well, that could be a good opportunity to get more RVT students involved. But going back to really quick, the subcommittee that was requested on shelter medicine access, Dr. Nolan, in the meeting that you attended with CVMA in regards to access to care, had that particular issue been included in those discussions? The lack of veterinarians in remote areas or remote areas that may have shelters that are without veterinarians?
It was not specifically addressed, though it was definitely a part of the whole picture when it came to a limited access to care. So it wasn't specifically discussed, at least in the part of the BOG meeting I was in, because I think Jessica's referring very specifically to that the bill that didn't make it out of committee and whatnot.
Yeah, so I'm wondering before creating another subcommittee that's if it's something that, especially if you're planning on having a stakeholder meeting soon, would be to reach out to those.
Sure, and if you recall, there was a bit of a difference of opinion as to how big the problem was. So it would be really good if we could have a part of our subcommittee looking at actual numbers, so we had some more data that would support the size of the problem.
Yeah. Jennifer, do you think that is a good place to start? Or do you think
Yes, I'm a fan of plagiarism, so I like it if Dr. Nolan does the work and then brings the information back to us.
Okay. Okay. You don't think it specifically needs its own subcommittee? You think Dr. Nolan can handle it?
Yeah, and again, I don't think that it's even simply an RVT issue. I just see some ways that RVTs can help alleviate that issue, but it's overall a shelter medicine issue, and it all comes back to access. So that's definitely the committee that we already have.
Okay.
So if we could splice onto that, that would be great.
Okay.
Can I make a comment? This is Dr. Solicito.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to say with regards to the access shelter to care, I think what really needs to be defined is, I know there is a Food and Ag code that defines somewhat what shelters can do. However, because of how the change in animal welfare and how people view animals from the shelter, the old ways of the default solution of providing euthanasia as the solution, to make sure that there is the prompt care, for animals that are deemed suffering. That has already been grayed out because we know that it's not really a clear decision that, okay, just because the animal is deemed to be suffering because of the lack of the ability of the shelter to provide that care, then they default to euthanasia. And so I think that looking into the standard that is being observed under the Food and Ag Code of what is going to be allowed, especially if there is like an RVT that is present versus the minimum standard that is being defined under a shelter that will be required to have a veterinary premise license. So I think there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen because it is a reality that there is a shortage of veterinarians that can physically be involved with the shelters, either on a full-time or part-time basis. But maybe that is the conversation that we could discuss about, guidance, oversight, training, and all of that stuff. I just wanted to kind of put that on the radar of the subcommittee and the Access to Care Committee.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Nolan's hand is still up and Jessica's hand is still up.
Yeah, I really agree with you, Dr. Salicito. I think you're absolutely right, and that's a very pertinent discussion because there's a lot of nuances to that, right? But I'm sorry, I'm getting a little hung up on the fact that we're going to lose Jennifer. I'm sorry, Jennifer, you've done a really great job, and I've just been very impressed with your work ethic and how dedicated you've been, and you're going to have big shoes to fill for sure. But I want to say just very respectfully two things. One is I understand how important it is to have adequate RVT representation on the board. And I feel like you've provided that, and maybe you've done it in a superhuman, way. I'm hearing you kind of say it's a lot more work than I'm letting on. Okay. But also we don't have board members based solely on representation, because if we did, the public members would be huge. We have a huge public representation, and we only have 3 public members, right? And I think part of that is because there are a lot of really difficult and complicated cases that we have to hear, right? And so, it becomes a challenge to make sure there's enough people that can help support the knowledge base. It's just my personal opinion, but I find as a veterinarian, sometimes I'm a little bit overwhelmed with some of the cases that we have to deal with from a knowledge standpoint. But that's not that's just an observation. The other observation is why does the RVT on the board have to also go to the MDC? I mean, we have RVTs on the MDC, and then the report comes back to the board. Is that have to be a requirement, or could it be a second RVT that is the liaison? I'm not quite sure why we've done that, and maybe it's just my ignorance, but I know maybe that's a question. I'm sorry?
It's a statutory requirement.
Okay. So that would, in my mind, that's an argument for having a second RVT, because that's a pretty heavy workload, I think, and I say that because I think, as Jessica made it very clear, RVTs don't tend to have the resources that veterinary, from a monetary standpoint, and maybe the ability to get time off and whatnot. So that to me is a pretty compelling argument.
So I would say that the addition of an RVT member would be a future agenda item, and the responsibilities of the RVT board member would probably be included in that discussion on who goes to the MDC meeting and so forth. Jessica, your hand is still up.
Yeah, I just want to make a couple quick reminders, more so to Dr. Solocito's point and Jennifer's point regarding the shelter issue. As a reminder, our sunset bill currently does include more exemptions for shelters to provide certain services without being registered with the board. And I think that the intent is to help with that issue. So that is going to be, it is in our sunset bill. Also, as you all remember, the shelter regulations themselves have not even started the process. So the board has approved it, but it hasn't been submitted to DCA yet, meaning there's going to be ample opportunity for the public to still participate, because we're still going to be having the public comment periods. And when we receive those comments, they'll go back to the board for discussion and decide whether or not the board wants to make additional changes based on the public comment. So there's still going to be ample opportunity to discuss this with the normal processes that are in place.
And if the DCA liaison is listening in, does the DCA have any restrictions on how many board members we can have? Can we just decide on our own to add a board member?
No, DC doesn't have any restrictions, and it really depends on the legislature and making those additions. The things that they look at right now, they're looking at compositions, looking at public majority versus professional majority. There's been a lot of debate of whether it should be a public majority or not. So that's been a sunset topic that they've been looking at. But when you look at across the board, when I say board, I mean DCA and all the boards and bureaus. Actually, it's just the boards. It really doesn't have a rhyme or reason to it. You could have a board with a lot of licensees with less board members than a smaller board, and a smaller board might have a lot more board members. So it looks like over time, it depends on just the need and things going on behind the scenes, driving additional board members. For example, when I was at optometry, we had a really large number of board members compared to the population. We had more than a lot of other boards who are a lot bigger than us. And when there was a controversy happening between some of the professions that were represented, one of the recommendations was to just add another board member onto it, which I think would make us close to what the medical board had, but we were one of the smallest boards. So over time, it really doesn't look like there's a set policy. It's just what's happening. But one thing to keep in mind, though, if you're looking at adding an RVT member to the board, then it shifts the majority to the veterinarians are no longer having the majority, which I'm just raising that because you would have the 4 veterinarians, 2 RVTs, and then the public member. So.
Okay. Yeah, I know that when we were in discussions about pay raises for the executive officer, I've never been able to understand the DCA's classification of large boards, medium-sized boards, and small boards, and so that I think that refers to the number of licensees, but there's no correlation between the number of board members to whether you're a big, medium, or small board. And it's also a good point that any changes that we made would have to go through legislature, and it may be a issue of be careful with what you're asking for. So that's all in the future agenda item. So if there's no further questions for Jennifer's,
It's Kathy. I'm waving.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Mark. I'll take my hand down. Yeah, I just wanted to say, and this is obviously we're going to discuss this in future, but I believe that the board composition, I'm absolutely in favor of adding an additional RVT. Personally, I just think that given the North Carolina case or South Carolina case, whichever Carolina, that, when the legislature looks at our boards, all the boards, the composition of the public members to the licensees, it may be a situation where we might have to add another public member to make the legislature comfortable. I don't know, but it's a bigger discussion, probably based on that court case, because of the composition that we're trying to maintain, or that states are trying to maintain.
Okay. Yeah, I've stretched out my chat box as much as it could, but sometimes your name pops out of my field of vision. So if I don't recognize your hand, feel free to shout out. But at this point, I don't see any more hands up. So if we wanted to open up for public comment for the RVT report, we can do so now.
This is the moderator. We've opened the Q&A panel. If you'd like to make a comment on this item, please click on the Q&A icon on your screen, type comment into the text field, and submit that to all panelists. And our first comment comes from Nancy Ehrlich. Nancy, your line is open and you will have 3 minutes.
Okay, I just wanted to say that Jennifer suggested that CARFTA would know if there was a student RVT association. I do not know that information, but I will definitely bring this topic to the board of CARFTA and see what CARFTA can do about working with students and the schools, and perhaps come up with some sort of an idea from CARFTA. That's all I wanted to let you know.
And seeing no additional requests, would you like me to close the panel?
Yes, please.
It is closed.
I would have to say, in all my years of serving on this board, that was the first RVT question that Nancy did not know the answer to. You are a wealth of information on RVT issues, Nancy. So that is the RVT report. I don't think we need to vote on that. And moving on to agenda item 15, National Association Involvement Reports. That is the International Council for Veterinary Assessment and the AAVSB member and program service think tank. As far as the think tank goes, we're going to be having a meeting next in the annual meeting in Denver. So I don't have much to report on that that hasn't already been said. It's going to be an in-person meeting so far, and I also will be making a technically my third run, but kind of my second run. That I applied for the position of a board of directors 2 years ago and did not make it. I applied again for last year, but the annual meeting was canceled. So there wasn't really an election. And so we're trying again this year. It would be nice to have a California representative on the board of directors because there are plenty of issues on the national level that affect us deeply and financially. So I'm going to turn it over to Kathy for the bulk of the report.
Thanks, Mark. I will say, and although the think tank hasn't had a lot of activity this year, I think we do have a scheduled meeting prior to Denver in August that's on my calendar anyway. So take a look on yours. I'm not sure if there'll be much to discuss, but I have it for August 12th. So I don't know. For ICVA, I don't have, my report is quite short. We just had our board meeting in June, the 24th and 25th. Again, due to the COVID situation, we've extended the testing windows for the NAVLEs. NAVLE for the fall testing window will go from November 1 through the end of the year again. And frankly, even with the pandemic, a lot of the testing centers having problems and, of course, limited numbers of folks they could test and closures, et cetera, et cetera. The NAVLE test takers were higher in 2020 than they were in 19. So that's great because we all know from all the comments how desperately we need veterinarians in this country and in Canada. I mean, the entire world, I think, is desperate for veterinarians of all types, including the specialty vets. One other thing that I think one of the things the pandemic did, at least for the ICVA board, and we have a number of very highly qualified staff in both assessments and in outreach. It's allowed our board to utilize a lot more virtual trainings, seminars using YouTube, et cetera, to work with students, to work with colleges, to give them NAVLE prep training, a lot of student outreach, which I think has been very well received, and they're going to continue with that. There were a number of seminars. They had hundreds of participants from all over the world, and it really, I hope, will be helpful to the students in alleviating a lot of their stress as far as looking towards that exam, which is such a high stakes exam for them all and their profession. And so anyway, that's one of the things the pandemic did. Well, prior to that, they used to, staff and board members would travel around to colleges doing life of an item and seminars like that. And so it's really blossomed into a virtual situation, which has been really helpful. We had two openings in the at-large positions, and given the amount of work and stress that veterinarians are under in this country and in Canada, again, we had an amazing a group of applicants because it's quite a bit of work. Obviously, it's kind of like our board; it's all voluntary. but we had some really highly qualified applicants from all over, including one or two from California, as I recall as well. So we filled those 2 positions on the board, and I'm happy to say, excited to say, that I was unanimously elected chair-elect for the ICVA, and I'll be the first non-veterinarian in its history. So anyway, so that just happened in November. So obviously, I'm hoping that AAVSB will reappoint me, and I'm also up for election this year again for my 3rd and final term to the ICVA. So that's my report. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
I do not see any hands up from the board. Hopefully you're all in my box, and we could open up to the public for any questions or comments, please.
This is the moderator. We've opened the Q&A panel. If anyone has a comment on this item, please click on the Q&A icon on your screen, type comment into the text field, and submit that to all panelists. And our first comment comes from Samantha Chessie. Samantha, your line is open. You will have 3 minutes.
Hi, I just have a quick question. You mentioned the AAVSB meeting in Denver, I believe you said in the fall. Do you know if that will be open to the public?
That's a good question.
It is a good question. I don't know. Everybody, it's a delegate meeting from all the states and provinces. Honestly, I do not know if it's open to the public, but you can contact, or we can contact the AAVSB. Let me see. Who should we have them contact to find out? I just don't know if it is.
Do you want to maybe send an email to Lonnie, and then when she responds, we can get the answer?
That's a good point. I'll do it right now and see if we can answer it immediately.
And if not immediately, you can shout it out if something comes. Yeah.
And with that, we have no further requests. Would you like me to close the panel?
Yes, please. And
it is closed.
It is 10:17. The next item is executive management reports. Why don't we take a 10-minute break, and then we will listen to our reports.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right, we will reconvene if everyone is here. Next item on the agenda is item 16A, administration. Is that Jessica?
That is me.
Oh.
Good morning, board members.
Timothy.
Yep. So I'm going to do a brief introduction before turning this over to Bikram, who will go over our budget information, providing a quick staff update for our admin team. All of our staff did return to the office in June of this year, with our analysts allowed some extra time to work at home during a couple days, but everybody is required to be in the office at least 3 days per week. And on June 1st, we lost our HR liaison and coordinator for the California State Board, Jackie French. She worked with the board for quite a while and was really a good heart for our office, so she will be missed a lot. And we are working to refill that position and reclassify it towards an enforcement position. So since most of her duties dealt with the California State Board and recruitment for that, with the elimination of the state board as part of our sunset, we can absorb her other duties with other staff members and reallocate that position to enforcement where it is very much needed. On June 1st, we hired a new receptionist. Her name's Kelly Harris. She's been working fantastically with us and really stepping up to the plate. So we're very happy to get her on board on our team. And most recently, we were able to convert our limited term positions into permanent positions. So this will really help further recruitment for the board, because when you're looking for the job, you want a permanent position, not a limited term position. So this will greatly increase our candidate pools, or should, for future hires. And do you have any questions for that before we go over to budgets with Bikram?
Tim, how many of those positions was it 3? I can't remember.
The limited term positions?
Yes.
We actually had a lot more than that. There was significant trickle down. So there was 6 with the enforcement, and that also trickled down to my admin and examination, who promoted into those enforcement teams. So there were 3 additional, and I think in total there were about 12 limited term positions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and Bikram? Can Bikram get promoted, please?
Hey there. Thanks, Tim. I appreciate the update. Hey, everyone. My name is Bikram Dhaliwal. I'm from the DCA Budget Office. First of all, good morning and happy Friday, members of the board. I'm here today to present a general overall budget update regarding fiscal month 11, which is May 2021. So all the numbers I'll be going over today incorporate data all the way from last July through May 2021 as we're closing up the fiscal year. So as I think we should all have the agenda item 16A administration report open in the agenda items. Those have the expenditure projections and the fund condition statement included in them, I believe on the last 2 pages. So I'll go ahead and just go over those. I'll outline as much as I can, and feel free to ask questions throughout, or I can answer them towards the end, whatever makes more sense. And go ahead and open the sections. So starting with looks like it's page 3 in agenda item 16A. So in front of us, we have the expenditure projections for fiscal month 11. And I'm going to focus mostly on the right side of the document for fiscal year 2020-21. And as you can see, the middle column is current year revised budget. So that was the budget for Veterinary Medical Board throughout the fiscal year. I think we've all seen that before at some point in some of the previous meetings. And then I have the current year expenditures in the column to the right, and then projections a couple columns over, and then the column on the far right, that's the unencumbered balance. That's basically taking what we're projecting and subtracting the revised budget amount. So where you see black, that means those are savings, and where you see red, that's technically spending more than the budgeted amount. But overall, I have great news in the sense that it looks like the board is on track to revert about 16.9% of the budget, and that equates to $1,075,000. So, and that's really good news for the overall condition of the fund. And a lot of those savings actually come from things like personnel services, attorney general costs, and travel. And because as we all know, travel has been significantly reduced throughout this fiscal year. So with some of those different categories, as I just outlined, those were the main drivers in terms of where we saw a large portion of the $1,075,000 in savings. So that's good news at the end of the day, because that will definitely allow the fund to basically continue operating in a healthy manner. And it's just overall fiscally responsible. So I have nothing bad to say about that. And it's a fiscal month 11 projection. So we do believe that these are pretty close to the actual amount we'll see when the fiscal year closes, which should just be in another couple months. So perhaps at the next board meeting in October, I may be able to provide actual figures for expenditures in the next upcoming meeting. But these numbers are pretty close. We feel pretty confident about how close these will be to actual figures. So any questions regarding the expenditure projections before I move on to the fund conditions? All right, I'll go ahead and, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't unmute. Where in this report, have you included anything in regards to legal fees related to our current lawsuit?
So I was going to say that that would come out of the Attorney General line item. So right now, I'm assuming that you're referring to the current lawsuit right now. It's in its infancy stages of that lawsuit, and which we'll talk about later. But right now, it would be coming out of that line item. There's not a separate line item for that lawsuit.
Okay, the one we were saving money on. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, so like Jessica said, any lawsuits, those expenditures would be incorporated in the Attorney General line item. And so, which we could all see has about $249,000 in savings projected. So even if there is a lawsuit, it would be captured in there. So I'll adjust accordingly once I get the June expenditures.
That should cover it. Kathy's hand is up, and then Dr. Nolan.
Thank you, and thank you, Bikram. Yeah, that was one of my questions about the San Francisco SPCA lawsuit, because that could get, I mean, that's a federal lawsuit that may cost the board and its licensees it could be up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that I just wanted to know. And Jessica, can we maintain those costs separately so we know internally what that suit costs versus our other disciplinary matters that the AG's office works for us on? Can it be?
Yeah, that's something that we can go to the board and report at future board meetings, because we do receive monthly billings from the AG's office, and so we'll be able to keep tabs on how much the lawsuit is costing the board.
Okay, thank you. Then on the AG's fees, I had a question. Is the savings there now because of our new efficiencies, or is it a combination of that, and or because we've been working remotely, we're not moving as much over to the AG's office? That's my question, because I'm wondering if, it's a true savings or if it's situational.
I think it's both. I think that we aren't sending a lot of cases over that would have been previously transmitted, and that's a lot of the collaboration that we're doing with the Attorney General's office. We're resolving the issues at a lower appropriate level, so less are going over. But as you know, from the enforcement standpoint, we're also closing less cases, and so that goes into it. But we also have done a number of efficiencies with the Attorney General's office. So I think it's all three of those situations that are contributing to the cost savings.
Okay, and then I did add another question about the OAL hearings. I know a number of them have postponed during the pandemic and everything else. I'm wondering, we're still in the red there. So, well, if they've been postponed, we must have had more expensive hearings, I guess.
So
than
the
we-
office administrative hearings line item has historically always been in the red. It's just a matter of truing up the budget, because that's a line item in the governor's budget, and that tends to not go up that much. But as long as at the end of the day we're in the black, then it's not really a concern of the budget team, because we're still good.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Those are my only questions on this part of it. Thanks.
Okay, my turn, I guess. Thank you, Bikram, very much. I assume, since you said 11th month, this is through the end of May, these projection numbers? Okay.
Yes,
And
that's correct.
Do you foresee any large movement, or you're feeling like it's probably, you think it's pretty close?
I do believe that it will be fairly close to what we see as the actual year-end figures. I think it's just another week or two until I get fiscal month 12 data. So that's something I'll definitely be keeping an eye out for. But overall, I do believe that these should be really close to what the actual amount will be without too much variation.
Right. Okay, great. And then I had a quick question for Jessica. The salary savings, are we fully staffed? And are those savings because we've had some salary savings from losing people and not being able to hire them as quickly as we'd like?
We do have salary savings from vacancies that occurred over the last fiscal year. I wouldn't say it's necessarily due because we lost individuals. It's the more so as we promoted individuals to the new positions, and so then we had to backfill those positions. And I think that there were salary savings there. And as you all know, there was significant salary savings when we all had to do a pay decrease for that fiscal year. So that was a big chunk of it. I think it was like $324,000 for the personnel savings.
Okay, so it looks like we've saved 300,000 approximately. So what you're kind of saying is we're fully staffed at this point, and those salary savings were most likely predominantly from the salary reductions. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, we still have a couple vacancies that just occurred, but yeah, predominantly it's from the pay cuts that we had to all endure.
Have they restored those salary cuts yet, or is there a timeline?
Yeah, as of July 1, we had that restored, but so we won't see it until our paycheck at the end of the month.
Okay, good. I'm happy to hear that.
But I think it's important to note for the record that salary savings is, pretty much directly from pay cuts that you were all asked to take or were given. Okay, thank you.
All right, so I'll go ahead and move into the next attachment, which is the fund condition statement. So just like previously for fiscal year 2019-20, those are actuals. I believe we've already covered those in some past meetings. But for the second column for current year 2021 or 2020-21, I plugged in fiscal month 11 revenue and expenditure projections, where once again, I do believe that these are going to be very close to the actual amounts at the end of the fiscal year. And overall, once again, just like on the expenditure side, I have good news for the revenue portion of the fund condition as well, in the sense that it looks like the board is on track to collect about $200,000 greater in revenue than what was originally anticipated and calculated during the fall budget building process last year. So that $7,799,000 amount where in the total revenues line item, that's what I'm projecting to be the total revenue for the fiscal year. And that's what I was referring to as it looks like it's about $200,000 or so greater than what was originally anticipated. And the large driver of that is the renewal fees. As we all know, that's where boards collect most of their revenue. So it looks like with the fee increases that were implemented and overall the other license categories, in addition to the renewals, everything's coming in on track and even higher than what was originally anticipated. So when you take into account higher revenues, lower expenditures, as I mentioned on the expenditure projections, it seems like we're on track to revert about 16.9%, which equates to $1,075,000. When you take all those numbers into account, the fund balance looks like it will be somewhere in the realm of $4,777,000. And that number is located pretty much down below in the fund balance reserve for economic uncertainties line item. So $4,777,000 looks like that takes into account the total resources, which is revenue and beginning balance, and it's subtracted by the expenditures and also things like statewide pro rata and pension payments. So all that into consideration, we actually have a month in reserve of 7.8, which has gone up from the previous board meeting back in April. So it looks like overall, as we got more data from fiscal month 8 to fiscal month 11 and refined some of these projections for both revenue and expenditures, the board looks like it is on track to be in even better financial shape than originally anticipated about 3 months ago. So that's overall good news. And as of now, for the budget year column for 2021, 2022, that just ties to the governor's budget, which I think is about the same as the May revised and the actual enacted budget. So that's something we haven't updated yet. As we go through the fall budget building process over these next few months, we'll start to get some more adjustments, and then we'll figure out what the current year revised budget is, and we'll work with the board to update the workload revenue depending on how things have changed. It looks like maybe revenue could be adjusted higher for the next fiscal year, but that's something that Jessica, Tim, and I will probably work on in the next few months. So we'll go ahead and update those types of metrics on the fund condition. But overall, it looks like the fund is doing well, and I have no concerns at this point.
There's a lot of hands up, but I just have a question. When we're looking at 2021, 22 compared to 22, 23, the total revenues is about the same. The total expenditures is about the same, and so the fund balance is about the same. Why is there a difference between months in reserve by about 2.5 months?
2 points. Yeah, that's a good point. It looks like it takes into account, that's because I think it actually then has a hidden column, and that column is not visible on this particular attachment, but there are more out years, and then those out years have their own revenues and expenditures. So the formula that we use to calculate that reserve, months in reserve for 22, 23, I think that's what you're asking for, the 5.5 months, I think I have it open on my own end so on my own fund condition that I have that I use and for this board meeting, it has out years. So it has budget year +2, +3, +4. And so that formula takes into account the next year's total expenditures. So it takes the fund balance and it divides it by the next year's total expenditures. So that's where the 5.5 was calculated. And I can definitely double check that after this meeting to confirm, but I do believe that's where I got that 5.5 from.
Okay.
Because the 3% multiplier, you know how I think it's in the notes on the bottom where every year we just increase expenditures by 3%. So, which is, more or less about accurate in regards to projecting how expenditures slowly increase every year just due to the cost of doing business. So that's just a multiplier that we use to capture any additional anticipated costs.
So the answer is in the hidden column of our fund balance.
It's invisible. It's there, but it's invisible.
I'm sure I think I understood your explanation. Dr. Nolan, please.
Laughing at the hidden fund, hidden columns.
Hidden column.
Great. Would you remind the board what the white lines are for months in reserve? I know there's a minimum and a maximum technically that we're trying to shoot for.
That's a great question. I know it kind of varies by the boards and bureaus. I don't.
Our minimum is 3 months, our maximum is 10 months.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know the minimum is definitely 3. It's the maximum. Yeah, it might be like 6 or 10 or something like that. I will have to check, but I know it's somewhere in that range.
So if the state pays us back the money that they borrowed, would that put us over our? No, it probably wouldn't put us over our max, would it? I think they borrowed.
No, and yeah, so right now, Vikram, I don't see that you have it going back into our fund, the $321,000. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. As of now, on this fund condition, I don't have 321,000 with interest plugged back in, but I do think that will happen probably in one of those hidden years,
Yeah.
in one of those outer years.
So members, just to keep in mind too, that even though it looks like the 7.9 and then the 5.5, these are projections and it doesn't account for any increases to cost. So if we needed additional staff, that wouldn't be accounted here. So if I were to do a budget change proposal, it would actually be less than this. If we are hit with high expenses, unexpected expenses, it also would not be reflected here as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I definitely concur with that.
Dr. Bradbury?
Thanks. I was just wondering where on this, I would think it'd be under settlements and judgments, but where cost recovery comes in when we have cost recovery from cases.
I think those sound to me like those would hit the expenditures via reimbursement. So that, even though reimbursements might seem like they're kind of more on the revenue side, they're actually captured in expenditures. And what basically happens is at the end of the fiscal year, when we have our actuals, our accounting team, they take the total expenditures and they subtract the total expenditures by the total reimbursements that were collected throughout the fiscal year. And I do think cost recoveries are actually a part of that reimbursement category. And then whatever the difference is from the total expenditures and the total reimbursements, that we actually call that net expenditures. And then that is what will ultimately be on the fund condition, what will be displayed on the fund condition as these were the realistic expenditures when you take into account the reimbursements that were subtracted by the expenditures. So that actually helps because then it reduces the amount of the expenditures that are displayed on the fund condition. And then that helps the fund balance.
Sure, that makes sense. I guess it might, and I don't know if you can do this, because I know some of these things are very specific in how they're organized and presented, but it might be helpful for us to know what our cost recovery is, because I think that's been something that I think we're trying to get a handle on. So I don't know, is that something that would be helpful for us to know, Jessica, or have as a line item?
So when you look at go back to the prior document, the expenditure projections, under total expense, there's sections there, the scheduled reimbursement, scheduled for fingerprint, scheduled reimbursement, other, and unscheduled reimbursements, it's in there. So that's showing you the amount of cost recovery that we've received.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that. I'm glad Jessica brought that up because that's actually very correct. That if you go back to the expenditure projections at the very bottom, those last few line items where it says scheduled reimbursements, fingerprints, scheduled reimbursements, other, and then the last one being unscheduled reimbursements, other, that negative 188,682, that actually is the cost recovery that I believe we're discussing, because I also have some of my own documents open right now just as backup, and I'm looking at the revenue projections that I completed for this meeting, and that 188,000 is cost recovery. So I think that answers that question. And right now, for display purposes, from what I know, the budget office is not allowed to display more than the actual budgeted amount for reimbursement. So as you could see, the 11,000 and the 15,000 on the expenditure projections, those are basically the appropriated amounts for scheduled reimbursements because we can actually schedule them. But for unscheduled reimbursements, it's a little more difficult to actually anticipate how they're going to be collected or how many are going to be collected. And so that's why we zero them out on the expenditure projections. However, at the end of the year, when we have final numbers, actual numbers, they are accounted for. So whenever we get actuals, which I think hopefully we might have for the October board meeting, I'll definitely try my best to incorporate those. And those will have the actual net expenditures, which take into account the total reimbursement, not just schedule.
Okay, I guess these budgets always throw me. I'm sorry. If we're getting reimbursed and getting paid, how is it ever a negative number at the end in the actuals? Because it says unscheduled reimbursements, and that's what I'm looking at, right? Under total expense, unscheduled reimbursements, kind of the last line on that chart, above net appropriation. Is that the right line I'm looking at?
Yes.
Okay, so if we're actually collecting money from cost recovery, how is it negative?
So the way that it's accounted for, it's negative because it's reducing the total expenditure. That's just how accounting does it. That's how it's accounted for in the system. I do understand this question gets actually brought up quite a lot, and since I've been in the budget office, even I'm trying to, put my mind around it. And it's the way I know that it's accounted for. It basically takes the expenditures and it subtracts it because the net appropriation, like even when you look at the budget column, it says that Veterinary Medical Board has a total budget of $6,408,000, but it subtracts the 11,000 and the 15,000 as the scheduled reimbursement, and then the total net appropriation, which is the total net budget, is actually $6,382,000. So it's just the way the accounting system works. On the back end, it's considered a reimbursement. It's like a negative expenditure, basically.
Is
just to add a little clarification too, keep in mind that this is what's in the governor's budget as well, the $6.382 million. And so when you do the governor's budget, you're not incorporating cost recovery that's been received because it's not an expenditure of the board. So it's only the governor's budget only will have the amount of money that we're allowed to spend, not collect. So that's why it's showing in red, because wasn't built into the governor's budget itself. Does that help clarify at all?
Can I try to summarize it and tell me if this is right? Say we have a case and the Attorney General's office charged us $300,000 to do, and we got $200,000 in cost recovery. Then our expenditure is $100,000. Is that what you're saying? You take the cost of the case, subtract cost recovery, and the balance is what you spent, and that's why it's under expenditure? Or do I still don't have it correct?
So we still spent the money. So if we spent $300,000 and then got the $200,000, that $200,000 is not certain that we would get it, and so it's not built into the governor's budget. Only what we spend is built into the governor's budget.
Because the cost recovery goes where? It goes back to the governor's?
No, it does go back into our fund, but it's not set in stone in the governor's budget because it's unpredictable.
It is unpredictable. Yes.
Yes.
And it's not an actual expenditure.
Yeah, I mean, I think I understand. I think I understand all that. I'm not going to say for sure, but I think I understand all of that. But I guess I know that it's not for sure. How do we account? Where is it accounted for? Is there some way that we can see that as a line item at some point where this is what we've been awarded, but this is what we're actually getting? Like I think, one of the things that came up during the sunset meetings was that we didn't seem to have a great handle on our cost recovery relative to the costs of each case. And not only did we not have a handle on what our cost recovery was going to be in terms of what is being awarded, which is never the same as the cost for a case, right? Because we're we can't even ask for cost recovery for the actual trial, et cetera. But not only, we have the number that's been awarded, but we don't even know, or I'm sure you do, but I don't know what we're actually then getting, as payment. And so I guess I'm just wondering where that is on here. I don't think it adds up to a lot, but I just wondered if that's something that would be worth knowing.
Yeah, so what I would actually recommend is we could start tracking that on the enforcement side, because what this is going to show you is just what we collected this fiscal year. But keep in mind, cost recovery, this could be cost recovery from decisions that were ordered 3, 4, 5 years ago. So it's not an apples to apples comparison when you're looking at how much we spent versus how much we got back, because cost recovery is tied to a specific case, and a specific case can go multiple years. So what we really want to know, similar to what Senator Roth wanted to know, is out of this one case, how much did you spend, and then how much are you collecting for that? And I think that's something that we can work on to incorporate in the enforcement section, but it's never going to be fully incorporated into this report.
Okay, got it. Thank you very much. Sorry to make that complicated.
No worries. That's totally an area that actually gets brought up a lot with some of our other boards and bureaus. I just wanted to add one last thing. And basically, for the Medical Board of California, for example, they also are very curious about their unscheduled reimbursements, their cost recoveries. And what they do is they actually have a line item on their fund condition for unscheduled reimbursements in the amount of $900,000. And even though they typically collect about $2 million in unscheduled reimbursements, they have a line item on their fund condition statement to in the amount of $900,000, just because that's maybe not as drastic as the $2 million. And that basically gives them more insight on where they will end up at the end of the fiscal year, at least on the fund condition side of things. As we've already now discussed, it's already on the expenditure projections. It's not on the fund condition though, but that's something that we can work together on and add for future board meetings if that's the direction we want to head towards. But I think overall, for transparency purposes, if we need to add something to the report or any other detail or backup regarding where the cost recoveries and unscheduled reimbursements are going or projecting for, that's something we can definitely work together on. And like the medical board example I mentioned, that's possibly one option we can do.
I just want to do a quick clarification. Medical board doesn't actually have statutory authority to do cost recovery. That's something that they're looking at doing in their sunset bill now. It went away quite a bit ago for other reasons, but now Senator Roth is looking at adding it back in.
Right. So for other unscheduled reimbursements, sorry, thanks for the correction. Yeah, they have like 4 or 5 other types of unscheduled reimbursements, and that was the amount I was referring to.
I realize I don't need to understand how accounting works because it's very complicated, but I do know that Jessica was very instrumental in making some changes to how the billing is reported for these cases. Have we seen some improvements with cost recovery because of those changes?
I don't know if we've seen them at this point as far as being able to recoup cost recovery due to the new template that DFI is using. And just for everybody who may not know what he's referring to, it's the issue that we found during the exercises that we've had to do for the Senator Roth report related to cost recovery As a reminder, we had issues with cost recovery because the cost declaration that DFI was sending was not adequate, and so you've seen a lot of decisions that that cost recovery was rejected because the declaration itself didn't meet the statutory requirement. And so because of that, we reached out to DCA and DFI and worked with the Attorney General's office to get a more compliant declaration that will help going forward.
We haven't seen the fruits of your labor on that yet then. Okay. Kathy's hand is up.
Thank you. I have one question on the revenues. Is in budget year 21-22, where the renewal fees go down a bit, 5.6 million from 5.8, is that because of the tweak we did to the fee increases a few months ago, or why did they go down?
So that's a great question. And I think I kind of mentioned earlier that the 21-22 numbers on this fund condition statement, those tie to the governor's budget, which the revenue for that was calculated last fall in October when we did the annual workload revenue drill with the board. And those are just numbers right now that were anticipated last fall, but as we can see in the current year for 2021, renewals came in pretty high, 5.8 million, so 5,841,000, which is about 200,000 greater than was originally anticipated. And so that is a number for 21-22 and onward that will most likely adjust throughout the workload revenue budget drill that we're doing, I think, in October. So maybe by the next budget board meeting, or maybe the one in January, by then we'll have something that's more updated to reflect where renewals are actually trending towards, which based off of 2021, it looks like they're trending much higher than what was maybe originally anticipated.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. And then I have another.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Just
sorry.
add one more clarification. So the revenue, as you remember from the VA CSP program, for since it started, there was a few years where we anticipated a higher amount of revenue than what we had collected. And then what I did in the fall when we did the budget drills to anticipate the amount of revenue that we're going to receive, we looked at the actual workload that we received, the actual renewals over the past years, to estimate what those renewals would be. And we were trying to be as fiscally conservative as possible with those estimates. And so it's better to under project than over project, because you don't, obviously. And so I think that's what you're seeing is we may have under projected it, but we'll readjust every year based on the workload from prior years.
Got it. Okay. Doubly makes sense. And then I have another question. Again, going back to the San Francisco SPCA lawsuit, just because it is potentially such a major unanticipated draw on our funds. We're at the beginning of it. No one knows, but it could potentially be a huge expense that I believe there is no state reimbursement for a lawsuit to a board. So everything would come from our licensing fees. And I wonder, within your budgeting process that you go into this year for next year, obviously these costs are being incurred now and will go forward. How you consider that, given the fact that we have other mandates that we have to accomplish, and just want to make sure that's not left, sort of off to the side when it could be potentially so big that it could take away our ability maybe to do some of the other work we need to do, or force us to raise fees. So I just don't know how you consider that. I've never been on a board where there's been an outside lawsuit.
So what we could do, members, is when we look at the expenditure projections, you can create another item in there that's basically you are putting a bucket there. It's not going to be official as part of the governor's budget, but what it can do is show you, if we estimate that this lawsuit is going to cost us X amount of dollars in this fiscal year, we can at least track it that way. so you guys see it, but it would be part of the Attorney General's fee, but we can work on making that more clear of where that happens. I've had to do that at one of my prior boards where we had some pretty significant expenditures that we knew were coming that we had previously unanticipated, and so we did a separate line item just to track that issue.
I think that would be great.
Any further questions, Kathy?
No, I forgot to put down my hand, sorry.
And any further questions for Bikram? And we can open for public comment on that report.
This is the moderator. We've opened the Q&A panel. If you'd like to make a comment on this portion of the report, please click on the Q&A icon on your screen, type comment into the text field, and submit that to all panelists. Okay, and seeing no requests, would you like me to close the panel?
Yes, please.
It is closed.
So that was our first report. The closed session is, we had told the presenters that we're thinking about a 1 o'clock time. So if we were to have an hour lunch, then we have about 45 minutes or so for the remaining reports. So let's get to them. Agenda item 16B, examination.
Okay, and that's me again. I did receive an ICVA newsletter. This was very interesting and helpful to get some background information on them and their communications. So we wanted to share that with you, make sure you all had that information. And we've got our examination statistics for the state board, NAVLE and VTNE. We did get our link with the AAVSB working to receive examination scores electronically. That happened on June 22nd. We did have one little hiccup though, where we received duplicate information for one group of testers. So the statistics are correct in our pass rates. However, I was unable to update the school testing programs total pass rates. We did reach out to the AAVSB for confirmation of the examination statistics for schools, and they said that information would be available in approximately a week. So I will have that for the next board meeting. We did have the RVT school inspection letter go out to RVT schools. I do know at least one school is here and had wanted to speak on this and their response to the inspection letter, where the board decided not to inspect schools even though we had the right to, based on their pass rates for their candidates. So of the schools listed, there were, I believe, 6 that would be, that met the criteria for inspection, and they all noted similar actions and deficiencies or items that caused deficiencies, such as when candidates would take the test, the time between graduating school and taking the test, as well as resources needed and student involvement. So I want to kind of end it here in case we did have the public comment from the school. Do you have any questions for me on this?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I also wanted to point out, because it wouldn't be a board meeting if I were not complaining about RVT fees, there was also a comment or two about the cost of the exams preventing. And then I also have a question for the rest of the board. I noticed there was some frustration from one of the programs as to why we were asking about the cost. Do we remember why we were asking about the tuition costs? Neither do
That
I.
was actually a request. I think that was a request from one of the board members. They wanted to know how much they and I apologize, I thought it was you, but I might be mistaken about how much money that they're having to spend, the RVTs themselves, for the tuition, and then not being able to pass the exam, I think was a concern that we wanted to know more information about.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions, further questions from the board? Please open for public comment.
This is the moderator. We've opened the Q&A panel. If you'd like to make a comment on this portion of the report, please click on the Q&A icon on your screen, type comment into the text field, and submit that to all panelists. And I'm not seeing any requests. Would you like me to close the panel?
Yes, please.
It is closed.
All right. Thank you, Timothy. The next report is
Licensing.
licensing, and you're still on.
That's still me. So we do have our licensing staff update. We did hire someone to replace Elizabeth Parker Smith. Her name is Kimberly Lynn, and she came from the California Department of Community Services. She's been very excited to work with us and join our team. She's been a very positive person and just fun to work with. She's taken over the premises renewal, so that's now solely with us. And I'd like to thank Patty and her team for taking care of the hospital premises while that's been going on, but it is now back where it belongs with my team. Renewal requirements, we still have a lot of questions about fingerprinting, although those are dying down now that the fingerprinting requirement has been around for 2 years, which is the renewal cycle. And then we do still get questions about continuing education, mostly due to the extensions that the governor has been granting and our director has been granting for renewals. We do
I
get.
just want to clarify that.
Yep.
Sorry, Tim. The fingerprint requirement has actually been in effect since 2012. It was just starting to be enforced for 2 years. So just clarifying.
Yeah, that's correct. The state board examination, when graduation season hit the colleges, we were getting a lot of questions about the state board. And with people planning for becoming licensed next year, we still get a lot of contacts about that and what we are doing to remove the state board as they heard it was going to happen. We've been informing them that it's tied to our sunset bill, and we do anticipate it passing and becoming effective January. We'd be reaching out to students and anybody who had applied with the board via listserv and other communications at the time that we have more information. So that's what we've been communicating to the students and persons who ask. You can see our licensing statistics. We've increased a lot in our applications and licenses. Again, that's due to graduation season happening and when examinations are offered. The huge jump in veterinarians is again tied to the graduations directly. So when the students do receive their diplomas, that's generally the last thing that's needed to complete the licensure for them. So with working with Western and UC Davis to have them upload diplomas directly to us, my staff were able to take care of those licenses as quickly as possible. So we jumped from, say, 80 or 90 licenses issued in the prior quarter to 350 or so from all the graduates this quarter. So that's why there's a significant jump in licensures. Processing times, we did discover that the report that was generated by OAS was not accurately including milestones, which stopped the clock for us once we need information from our candidates. So we worked on revising the report with OIS to accurately reflect that and have the updated processing times below. There are still some high ones, and I recently discovered after working with staff that It was not clearly communicated with them how to stop a milestone, and they were deleting them instead of putting an end date on the milestone. So the calculation time for processing times would be the entire time and not subtracting out any time that we would be waiting for staff information. Or I'm sorry, for candidate information. Do you have any questions for me on this report?
Kathy, I see your hand.
Yeah, sorry, was looking for the little hand. Sorry. Thank you, Tim. Yeah, actually, I do have a couple of quick questions. One, the work you're doing with OIS to make improvements to Breeze, to hopefully reduce the delays in processing. When are you hoping to complete that?
We are planning, honestly, next year, we're going to be completely revamping our licensing system once the changes have been made to remove the California State Board.
And to clarify, there has been a number of Breeze improvements in licensing, and you'll see, and actually we're not comparing this to prior years, but this is a lot faster than prior years that we're processing. And as Tim said, the ones that are a little higher, it's more because it's not pulling out the time that we were waiting for the candidate to provide information, such as we needed them to graduate. And so that's not in our control. So the intent is you put in a milestone which stops the clock for the board to capture that time. But like you said, there was periods of time where that wasn't being included, and so it looks a little higher. But for the most part, a lot of the improvements have already been made in licensing, but it's going to be even faster once the sunset bill is enacted.
Okay. Then I have a couple of questions. Again, I write notes on these reports, the Breeze system reports on the various types of licensure and the date and the times to process. So I have a couple of questions. One, what is, it's under veterinary and reciprocity, but it's final license application. What does final license application mean?
That is the application for the license itself. It's the final step in our licensure process. So we start with an initial examination and review application. Once the candidate has met our requirements for examination and review and have completed those requirements, they're then able to apply for the license itself. So once they complete the final license application, their license is issued to them and effective on that date and will expire based upon their birth month.
Okay.
And I wanted to add to that, that is actually really important when you look at the cycle time, because right now the average was 15 days. That's important because they're applying once they've already met it. So they've already met the requirements. They've already taken and passed the examination. They've already graduated. And so with the enactment of the sunset bill and then being able to strike a lot of the requirements and regulations because they're no longer applicable, when we do the revamp of the Breeze design, that's all they're going to apply for is the license application rather than multiple applications. And so it should go down to that time frame once they apply.
Okay.
It'll roll up all the other transactions that you see above that. You'll only be looking at the final license application.
Oh, I see. Got it. Okay. Then another, and this may be a stupid question, but on the RVT licensure application spreadsheet, you know, you have received paper, received online. Obviously, most are online. There's a couple in paper. And then it says average paper cycle time in days. So the June, for instance, June, we had 2, but we're showing 170 days as an average cycle time.
The cycle time is when the applications were closed. And again, this deals with the milestones not being closed. I looked into this one and we were waiting for a social security number or examination results. So it captures the entire time from when they first applied until they were issued the license.
But I'm confused because we got 2 in June And it says the average cycle time is 170 days. Is that, those aren't for those two? Because
Correct.
it's all paper applications prior to that?
It's paper applications that were closed in June.
That were closed in June, so it's not relevant.
Which are two. So there's only 2 approved paper applications in June, and those 2, the average time to close those 2 was 170 days. But like Tim had said, and one thing that's a big difference between this application and the others for the veterinarians is that this application includes from the time that they start to be, they're asking to be eligible for the examination to the time that they get licensed. And so they'll apply with us and try to get approved to take the national exam. And so there's that whole period of time where we're waiting for them to pass the exam before they're actually eligible to get licensed. And so that's why you see, and you know, when you're comparing this to the veterinarians, it looks like it takes us a lot longer to do the RVTs, and that's just not the case. It's how it's set up in the system. And as you recall from prior meetings, the board had approved regulatory changes that removes the board completely from the exam eligibility review. So once that happens, we can change this to we get out of the way for the exam. As soon as they pass the exam, they can apply, and it'll go a lot quicker.
Okay, so then it'll be much more relevant to these. Okay, got
These
it.
future efficiencies we're really looking forward to.
I bet. All right. Thank you very much.
Dr. Nolan?
Yes, thank you, Tim. Just a quick question. Because I'm fuzzy on the background of this, but I'm looking at the VA CSP applications, and there's quite a number that are pending from the online applications. But didn't we have a problem with people, like people moving into a different clinic and then they never close those? Or is that because we don't have a mechanism to close it?
That's part of it. I believe that's built into our sunset, is the ability to expire applications with us.
Okay.
So right now they do sit open.
So
yeah, it's the ability to abandon the application. So there's hundreds of applications that they're just pending. And so once in January 1 comes, we'll build it into Breeze to expire that. So you'll see that number drop dramatically.
Great. That's what I thought, but I just was hoping for clarification. Thank you.
So we can say that the best report is yet to come after our sunset bill passes. It should definitely help out a lot.
And we are getting a lot more communication with our reciprocity candidates. So we're seeing more temporary licenses instead of full reciprocity, or candidates will open both in the anticipation of the January removal of the 3-day course.
Yeah, that should be a really interesting number when that happens. Any further questions from the board? And we can open up for public comment on licensing.
This is the moderator. We've opened the Q&A. If you'd like to make a comment on the licensing portion of this report, please click on the Q&A icon on your screen, type comment into the text field, and submit that to all panelists. First comment comes from Nancy Ehrlich. Nancy, your line is open. You will have 3 minutes.
Okay. I just wanted to point out what I pointed out yesterday, that the RVT numbers are going up a lot, and the relationship of RVTs to premises has significantly improved, so that we have more than 2 RVTs per premise now, which definitely leads to a rethinking of the VA CSP program, which was initiated when there were apparently not enough RVTs to serve every premise. So certainly we have them now. So I urge you to reconsider how the VA CSP program works, since I know it causes a lot of grief for you too. That was it.
And seeing no additional requests, would you like me to close the panel?
Yes, please.
It is closed.
Okay. Thank you, Timothy, for your report. I know you're not going to deliver the enforcement report. At least I don't think you are.
Are you sure, Tim? You can take over. Hello, everyone. Rob Stephanopoulos. I am going to go over the enforcement report, and then my co-manager, Matt McKinney, can step in whenever he wants. I'm sure he's ready and raring to go. So, as Tim mentioned, staff is back in the office 3 days a week, which has been great. Managers are back in the office as well. So I think it's really facilitated a lot more face-to-face meetings, which I think has been missing, obviously, during this last year, which has been pretty hectic. Matt has been, the other manager, obviously, has been picking things up extremely quickly. We went ahead and we broke into 2 teams so we could better manage the one-on-ones and just handle the personnel issues and whatnot. Matt is going to be overseeing, as part of that, the probation program, while I'll be overseeing the expert witness program. And let's take a look what else. We have increased the amount of one-on-ones that we did. Previously, I think I reported that we were doing one-on-ones about once a month with staff. We're doing them on a weekly basis right now, which I think has gotten a lot of positive results. And it's gotten I think most of the teams, I haven't really heard any of the team members say anything bad about having more access to management training, as well as the ability to go over their cases in a more intimate environment. So that's what we're doing right now. It obviously takes up a lot more of the manager's time, but I think it's going to be well worth it because we're really trying to dedicate as much as we can to that individualized training. We have cut down on the team meetings a little bit. We're still having them, but we've just changed the focus onto the one-on-one part of it. We did have a vacancy in intake, which I mentioned during the last board meeting. We have filled that vacancy. We filled it, I believe, last month. And as a result of that vacancy, we did lose a little bit of ground on our intake cycle times. I think we were just above 10 days, which is our target. So we're still pretty close. And with the new hire, Mr. Chang Vang, we are going to catch up pretty quickly, I think, because he's catching on to the process extremely quickly. Let's see, we did lose one of our analysts, one of the 6 that we hired via the limited term BCP. So we do have a vacancy that we're trying to get posted and filled as soon as possible. Obviously, with the loss of our personnel liaison, we've split the duties between the managers. So basically, Jackie, Tim, Matt, and myself, whenever there's any kind of personnel issue, we jump on it immediately just for our individual teams. So that's what we're doing with this vacancy and a couple other vacancies, but we should get them filled extremely quickly. Let's see, I think it was the MDC, or sorry, it was already discussed about the MDC with the inspections program being merged, I think yesterday, just in the MDC discussion. And let's see, AG's office, I updated some of the numbers for the cases that ended in disciplinary action and the cycle times. So in the narrative of the report, it's going to be a little bit different than the actual stats that you'll see at the bottom of my report, because I went through and hand counted and went through each of the disciplinary cases or the cases that were at the AG's office for the last 3 fiscal years, just to get a clarification on some numbers. So the average cycle time for those cases was 1253. I think it says 1273, so reasonably close. But instead of 27 cases, it's actually 74 cases, because many of those cases had companion cases that were also at the AG's office that do count as cases that ended in discipline. Obviously, we are working on the oldest cases, which are typically more complex. I think we've kind of said that ad nauseum at this point, but that's really what we're dealing with right now. But we're still going to keep going through them. We have been making good use, I mean, I don't want to say it that way, but of our DAG liaison, Karen Denver. We actually met with her a few days ago because we want to have her meet with not only the managers, but with the team members so that they can ask about case specifics and just get a legal perspective on the strength of a case, challenges, or just some of the evidentiary issues. So we did meet with her earlier this week, and that was really great. And as usual, she's always presented herself as being available anytime somebody needs help. Let's see. So I did mention an intake. We did have that vacancy, which slightly rose our cycle times, but they should drop down pretty quickly. And during the pandemic, so obviously this last fiscal year has been extremely hectic, we had a significant rise in complaints. So, I mean, in my opinion, it's significant. We had a 25% rise of the last year. And obviously last year and the year before have been higher than what we had, let's say 5 years ago by a long shot. So we had another big jump in complaints. And that obviously is just going to affect the bottom line when it comes to our backlog of cases. And then just another point of clarification. I know I mentioned during the last board meeting that we had the highest number of complaints, and that reference was not, that was within VMB and not with DCA. So when I mentioned that we have the highest number of complaints, it's just it's a VMB number. There are obviously other boards and bureaus I think that might have higher complaints. I mean, there are some that do, but as far as what we're looking at, we are getting more and more complaints. I think a couple of months in, maybe during our first board meeting this fiscal year, I just took a straight line guess on what our complaints would look like. And it looked like we would have slightly more complaints than the prior fiscal year, but it was, I underestimated that because obviously during this pandemic, we just had a significant jump. So we looked at over 1,600 complaints this year versus, I think it was 12 something or around 1,300 last year. So a pretty healthy jump. And obviously that's had a result in the backlog, which we're looking at around 3,500 right now. The proportion of the complaints that we're getting is still consistent where the vast majority, so we've got over half of our complaints that come in are alleging negligence / incompetence, which are under our statute, the highest priority complaints. So it does, as I mentioned during the prior board meeting, does make it hard to triage these complaints. But that's still what we're looking at. We do have a little over 400 cases that are over 3 years old. Those are obviously our main focus because we want to get those old complaints done. Obviously, a lot of these complaints, we almost have to start fresh. Some of the evidence is extremely cold. Some of these cases, we're trying to find all the evidence that is just even referenced because they're old physical files, but we would never want to simply say, oh, well, we can't find this, or this is old, so let's just close this. We want to stick to our mandate of investigating every single complaint that we have to the full extent. Let's see what else we've got here. D of I think I mentioned we've really tapered down our usage of the Division of Investigation for our field investigations. We've shifted a lot of that to utilizing our inspectors, which has been really great because it's a lot cheaper and it's a lot faster. We have utilized D of I just in cases where it does require it. So if we have an undercover, if there's a safety issue, if we need some interviews done, then of course we're going to involve D of I if that's necessary. But we have noticed that our cycle times for D of I specific cases have dropped down pretty significantly as well. And I think that's really a result of the staff being on top of those cases. So they've been following up with a case at D of I, whereas I think previously we might send a case over to D of I and then just it kind of goes into the the black hole, and we don't really press them to say, hey, what's the status on this? What's the status? And the fact that we're really focusing on the oldest cases means we need to get these cases pushed forward. If we're requesting D of I, it's going to be on an older case, and we're going to be following up with them on a regular basis. So those cycle times have dropped pretty significantly for those D of I cases. But obviously, once we close the entire case, since it's already going to be an old case, then it's going to be an older cycle time or a higher cycle time. Whoops, lights went off. Let's see, the expert witness program. I think this was discussed during the MDC meeting. So we've got a lot of plans in place, and we're really excited to have Dr. Bradbury on board. I think it's great for the complaint audit subcommittee. So the two members are going to attend one of the upcoming trainings through the medical board. They're going to create some scenarios that are veterinarian specific. And then they are going to be, I think, really incremental in a vet-specific training that Karen Denver is working on right now, but board staff and then the MDC subcommittee are going to be working on that as well. And I think that's really going to strengthen our expert witness program even more. So really, really excited about having Dr. Bradbury on board. And let's see what else. Yeah, and then after that, I mean, we've got some strat plan accomplishments. So we've got a few that are listed there. I believe there's an item specific for the strategic plan. We've got the mail vote, just the recap of what many of you already are aware of. And then we've got the stats listed at the bottom. So with that, were there any questions about the report or the stats or anything enforcement related?
I have a question. Cycle times I know are affected by all that is involved in due processing and staffing and so forth. So my hat's off to you for all the efforts that you make and for not throwing in the towel when you see all those pending cases. Your work is appreciated. My question is, you know, with as far as the number of complaints, with each year, the higher the licensee population, I would assume the higher the complaints would be. And then we also saw that there was a bump in complaints when the process was made available online. It was easier to file a complaint. And this 25% increase in complaint that you mentioned over the period of the pandemic is possibly explained by people just being crankier and the challenges that veterinarians had to do with curbside services and social distancing and so forth. It was definitely difficult, but the more important number is to know, has that resulted in an increased percentage in disciplinary action needed to be taken? So are we seeing more negligence or just more complaints? I guess.
More complaints at this time, and I think the part to think about too is that, you know, we're dealing with an extra, you know, over 1,600 complaints from this fiscal year, but the cases that we're working on have already been established. So we're working on cases that are, you know, well over 3 years old, and they weren't directly affected by that jump. So the proportion the proportion of discipline, we're not going to see if there is an increase until we get to those complaints that we just received. And obviously with 3,500 complaints backlog, we're not going to get to those. I mean, I would love to say we're able to get to those within, you know, 180 days. But I know that that's just not realistic. I know the staff is really, really trying to do their best. And I completely empathize with them because I know it is kind of a kick to the morale when you see like, hey, I've got 400 cases that I'm responsible for, because it's just such a, you know, such a mountain to climb. So yeah, we won't know about that specifically at this time. So right now, all I can note is just the increase in complaints. But I think with your assumption about, you know, people being at home, being a little more cranky, some of the guidelines that were recommended, I think that all has to do with that increase in complaints. So.
Okay, yeah. All right, thank you. Dr. Bradbury, and then Kathy.
Yeah, thank you. And Rob, thank you for all of your hard work. And I just want to preface this that, you know, me asking these questions, it's not, I'm not trying to be critical of you. I just am trying to, I want to see if there's another way of potentially looking at things. So I'm concerned when I see these numbers of, you know, the 400 or so cases that have been, you know, more than 2-3 years.
3 years, yeah.
And I know that those are, and I know that, you know, you guys inherited that, and I am sorry that happened because it definitely has sort of made this very difficult to try and get ahead. My biggest concern with that, not only is it that, you know, if there is a serious issue that those practitioners have been practicing for that amount of time, beyond that, and it sounds like you're now trying to rework the entire case, which, you know, if it's already taken this long, it's obviously going to take a long time. to put it all back together and to prosecute it if that's what we need to do, et cetera. My concern is that this is like a hamster wheel. And so the newer complaints you're saying you may not get to because we're still focused on getting these other complaints. And then in 2 years, we're going to still have the same problem because we've been continuing to try and get the oldest cases done first. And while I know that we need to do that, if we are getting additional staff and we are combining the inspections unit, which I think will be really helpful, is there any thought in sort of getting a specific group, like, some that are focused on some of the newer cases so that we don't end up in this huge backlog in the future? Because I feel like we just keep doing the same cycle over and over. And perhaps, maybe some of the more senior people who've done this for a long time sort of are focused on some of the older cases. I don't know. I'm not a manager. I just wonder if there's an idea of maybe rethinking how we're approaching it, or I'm worried about this continuing.
No, and I absolutely share your concern, and I think Jessica, Matt, Patty, we all share that concern, and I think we are thinking about ways. Is there another way that we can do this? This obviously seems like the most fair way, but we have discussed possibly involving some of our technicians on a specific subset of our cases. We also discussed going through the backlog just to see if we could do maybe a superficial look at the cases to see if there were any that needed to be triaged. Obviously, part of what we do when we look at these old cases is we group them with the newer cases. So if we have somebody, Dr. Smith, for example, who has a complaint against him and it's an old case, but then we've got several newer cases, we'll group those all together. So the investigations occur on a newer case as well. And a lot of times, I think I've mentioned, we do have some frequent flyers. So when there's a couple of cases, there might be a few more that are out there. But we definitely have discussed that. I know that when Matt came on board, I loved having, his fresh perspective, not only from being an enforcement analyst, but also just coming in and saying, how can we do this? But this is what we have come back to, but we're not opposed to seeing if there's a better way to do things. It just really hasn't presented itself to make it so that we're not just doing the same thing that we're doing, which would be, kicking the can down the road or just shifting it from one to another. And I think playing the game of, the shell game, I guess, so to speak, not only can it make things more difficult, but it can be problematic once you go and have to report stats. Because if you are trying to take some of the newer cases, mix them with the older cases, automatically your numbers are going to be a bit skewed. So you're not really given a true perspective of how long those cases are actually taking. So when somebody files a complaint and they say, oh, it takes 2 years, to do this, and that's because we're taking some old cases and some new cases, and that's the average, that's not to say that their case might not take more than that amount of time, and the average is not a true representation of how long it's realistically going to take. But yeah, I mean, to your point, absolutely, we're looking at any way that we can do that. I don't know whether Jessica wants to chime in at all and give any further insight into some of those efforts, but I know that we've definitely talked numerous times about this, because I know Matt and I have definitely have the same exact concerns.
I'll just add a little bit, because like Rob said, we are closing newer cases because the newer cases come in as we're looking at the older cases as well, if they have multiple complaints. So that part we are looking at. But what I would caution the board is to not let the cycle times drive the decisions in processing complaints when it comes to consumer protection. Because while it might look better statistically if we do the newer cases, we have those 400 complaints, which a lot of them are egregious allegations where animals have been harmed, and we're working to close those quickly as possible because, as you know, every day that goes by, those individuals are still practicing. And so there's a lot of concerns that we don't want to go to the newer cases just for the sake of helping our stats when we really should be concentrating on the fastest way to address these old cases. And we know it's a cycle, but we do think with getting the inspection program into here, that'll add additional individuals into enforcement. That'll help.
One of the other things too, I know I just briefly touched on it, was, you know, the possibility of going through the over 3,000 cases that we have and trying to triage those better. And I know, you know, I think Matt had mentioned that, and I just took some loose numbers because we have physical cases that have not been scanned, so they're not easily accessible. But I estimated just, hey, if it takes 10 minutes to determine whether or not a case needs to be triaged of those 30, you know, over 3,000 cases, if one person dedicates themselves, and I know Matt was, you know, he really wants to try and figure out how to do this. And he said, I don't care, maybe I'll do it. And I said, okay, well, here's the math. And it was like a month and a half straight dedicated to just going through those cases at just 10 minutes a piece, which really isn't a lot because sometimes you don't even know whether a case is going to be particularly egregious until you start to do some investigation. Sometimes we'll get into a case and we won't even know who the respondent is until we start to do some investigation, because it turns out they filed it against the, you know, the wrong vet or just the facility or whatever it may be. So it's never that easy. And that was just a conservative, you know, number to say, hey, 10 minutes just to take a quick peek. And it was going to be one person dedicated to that, you know, for a month and a half, which, you know, at this point, we really don't have the resources to do that. And I don't know whether or not that would really even be beneficial at this time, because I think, like I said, the majority of our cases are high priority regardless. So yeah, we're kind of in a tough situation. We're trying to make the best of it that we can. And I think this has been the most fair, straightforward way to do this. And I think it's especially fair to the consumers. I know it's, you know, to some consumers who file a complaint and it's been 6 months, they call in and they start yelling and screaming at me. But, you know, it's a lot easier for you to just take care of that squeaky wheel, but it's just not fair to the person who's been waiting 3 or 4 years and they figure vet med board, they threw my complaint away. They're not going to ever get back to me. They've lost hope. And that's really sad because they have suffered a loss, obviously, and we don't want to just, you know, shirk off that responsibility and not investigate that complaint. So, yeah, we're definitely looking at it. And I'm sure, Dr. Bradbury, we can definitely talk more, because I know that you'll probably have some ideas. So I am, you know, I'm sure we'll definitely be in regular contact about that.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to be clear. I'm not really, it's not the cycle times or statistics. I actually don't, I personally am not as hung up on how things look. I'm more worried about the consumer protection as well. And so I do understand that. I guess I'm thinking about the consumer protection on the point of, you know, if there is something really egregious that comes in now, and we're waiting 3 years and then it's hard to get the evidence by then. Just as an example, like that's what I'm worried about happening. So I love that you guys are continuing to brainstorm and try and come up with things, and that there is some, you know, fresh eyes on it is always a good thing. And so having the second manager, I think, is going to be helpful. And I see that you've made some changes already, like in just how you have 2 teams and you have rookies and the senior analysts or the people who have more experience. I think that all of that is probably going to really help things out. It's just hard to think that, you know, in 3 years we might be saying, you know, the cases that came in through the pandemic, now we're working through those, and I just am. Yeah. I'm always trying to figure, like, I feel like, oh, there's got to be a way to do this, and I know you guys are staying up at night thinking that too. But anyway. Yeah, I'll keep on the subcommittee working with you, and I'm excited about that. So thanks for all your hard work, both of you. I know you guys are, and to the team, please.
Absolutely. Yeah, the team has been great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just need to clarify, for the really egregious ones that come in, we do act on. So it's not just the flat, we have the oldest case and that's it. We're not like turning a blind eye. If there are really egregious ones, we have certain tools in place to work those quickly.
Kathy, and then Dr. Nolan.
Hey, hi. Thank you, Rob, and team, for, as everything we've said, all the hard work you guys are doing. And I know over the last couple of years of our board meetings and working with you and Jessica, that you have really improved the efficiencies, on the processing, hopefully getting Breeze to work better, getting everything to the extent that that has something to do with it, the trainings and all the rest. But I'm still struggling because, like you guys, I hate to see these numbers, right? And it seems to me that I just don't know if we're getting like 1,500 complaints a year, but we have still a huge backlog. It still seems like an insurmountable hole to dig out of with the staff we have. And honestly, I keep going back to the fact that we have 30,000 approximate licensees and millions of consumers. And so it's not unusual that we would get a lot of complaints, and not all of them are valid, of course, but they all have to be investigated. And so I'm just wondering if, we go back to the fact that maybe we still need a larger enforcement staff.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Because the bottom line is we're not helping to protect the public. Unfortunately, as much as we work 24 hours a day, you work 24 hours a day, just never getting getting over this big, huge hump. And not only that, there's practitioners that have complaints on them that they know that maybe will be ultimately dismissed, but it might be 2 or 3 years, not to mention the practitioners that have complaints that have problems and are continuing to practice. So the whole situation is just, even with all the efficiencies you're doing, it still seems like we still need about double the staff we have. I don't know how else to go approach this. But it seems like we should ring the bells higher up to show what's going on, because there's just no way else. You've already maximized everything you can do.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, you're exactly right. I think staffing that's really the core to the whole problem. I think that the efficiencies, that's something that we're always going to do, and it is going to make, somewhat of a difference, but it's really kind of a drop in the bucket compared to just the overall need for staff. Because I mean,
human subjective analysis that has to happen. It can't be done in an automated way,
right.
Things like that, to do it right. So
Right. No, and that's exactly right too. And I think, even, I mean, our DAG liaison and several DAGs have mentioned that our cases are among the most complex of any of the boards out there. I mean, we're dealing with, yeah, I mean, they are. And I know that Matt came on board and he's worked for a couple of boards, and I know that he would probably echo that sentiment just based on his experience with VMB. But like I said, I mean, we're dealing with patients who don't, they don't have a voice. So we're trying to really just put the pieces together. And, the unfortunate reality is the majority of our cases, as I explained, are alleging negligence or incompetence. We just don't get those, low hanging fruit cases where they say, this person was rude, or I think they overcharged me. The cases that, you're kind of like, oh, this is going to be an easy one to close. I mean, they're all, pretty scary cases, where they're saying they did this and they killed my dog, or they did this and now my dog, sorry, lights went off again. My dog has to live with this, this permanent condition. So we just don't get those, those easy cases. So I think that's really what speaks to the need for more staff, because I think in many cases you can't compare our board and our enforcement unit to apples to other boards. We're definitely a one-off. You're dealing with, the entire body. You're dealing with multiple species. You're dealing with, even multiple scopes when it comes to, whether it's, small animal or equine or, any manner of things. So it's definitely a lot more complex, I think, than people would give credit, maybe just at first blush. So I think you're exactly right that it does come down to staff.
I do have yeah, well, that's for another day, I guess, but I think it's something we have to consider and do whatever we can in our power as board members and to advocate for that. I do have a question about the pie chart, and I've always wondered about this, but you're so busy trying to put the fire out that's existing, doing more analysis on this seemed to be low on the totem pole. But these are complaints by violation type. When a complaint comes in, it's categorized as negligence or what do you call it? Unprofessional conduct. That's how it's categorized when it comes in, right?
Right.
That's how the pie chart's created. So I'm wondering, upon investigation on these complaints, if there's any way at some point when anybody had free time to ascertain whether upon investigation, even though the complaint alleged this or that, the real problem was lack of communication or something like that, that perhaps the board could address in other ways with practitioners so that it might sort of alleviate some potential complaints. And I think I'm thinking from my ICVA hat about training and teaching of veterinarians and on communication and things like that, which, a lot of these complaints, once you sort everything out, comes down to a lack of understanding or miscommunication or something else that isn't a negligence per se.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right, because once we do investigate that complaint fully, or at least get into it a little bit, we can pretty much figure out whether it's going to come down to a negligence or incompetence, or maybe something as simple as a communication issue. We do strive to achieve discipline at the lowest level possible, or enforcement action at the lowest level possible. So if education is appropriate, then we will certainly educate them with a letter. The unfortunate reality too is that I mentioned we have some frequent flyers, so in many cases, an educational letter is not appropriate. We're looking at cases to where, yeah, I mean, we could give them an educational letter, but in my opinion, it's not appropriate because they've gone far and above that. So a citation, at minimum is warranted, or discipline. We of course are still getting these cases that are older, and they might be kind of a sole case or just a solo case, and education is appropriate in that case, and that's fine. But like I said, we're just getting a lot of cases that are grouped together, and we can't just simply educate them at that point. And I think we'd be going a little light-handed there. And that's what makes it difficult, because sometimes we don't figure that out until we've already done that investigation and gone into it and figured out the situation. But older cases as well, if it's a solo case and it's been 4 years and there's been no repeat, that's mitigation in itself. So the likelihood, depending on the circumstances, of course, there's never just a blueprint, which obviously would make things easier, to say, well, we had a communication issue here and it was 4 years ago. Yeah, likely we're just going to educate them because the fact that it hasn't been a repeat occurrence, it looks like it was a one-off, that would seem appropriate. And of course, I'm speaking in generalities because it depends on the circumstances of the situation, but we're going to absolutely do that wherever we can. And I think that's where it is important to educate our licensees. But yeah, I mean, many times we just can't go about it that way. So yeah, we have to incentivize that compliance through a citation, or further protect consumers by taking disciplinary action against a license.
Mark, did you want me to, I forgot because I asked Rob the question, but I do have an answer for the caller.
Yes.
From earlier, if that person's still on the session here. The AAVSB is not an open public meeting. It's for delegates and special invited guests, so it is not public.
Okay, Dr. Nolan.
Thank you, and I'm sorry, I know we're strapped for time, but thank you, Rob and Matt and your whole team. Really appreciate all that you do. Just a couple of quick thoughts. One, we mentioned that the cases are usually much more complex, but is there a benchmark in the Department of Consumer Affairs for the ratio of resources as far as staff and complaint numbers? And can we look at that? Because I don't have any idea. And we've seen the org chart before, and I haven't seen it recently, and I don't remember. But as we look to have maybe less staff resources for licensing, or we're hoping there will be less, will that be delegated towards enforcement and help with that, including, I know we're taking hospital inspections and maybe merging them in that, but so those are all helpful. But those are my two thoughts, staff resources.
Yeah, I don't know of anything DCA that would I guess qualify the complexity of our cases. Jessica, it looks like you want to say something. Good.
I was say when it comes to workload, it's typically 80 to 100 cases per analyst. That's deemed a manageable level. We're way over that. And so that's a good benchmark that we can use in budget change proposals to get additional staff. But I think for us, and to your question about reallocating staff, that's something that we are regularly looking at. With the inspection team coming over, that's additional 5 people to go into the enforcement program. With the elimination of the California State Board examination, like Tim had referenced, with that going away, we reallocated that to the enforcement program. So any efficiencies that we are able to come up with in the other unit, we're reallocating those to enforcement because we all know that at the end of the day, it comes down to a sheer numbers issue. There's just way too many complaints for the number of staff allocated to enforcement. And so we are committed to looking at reallocating existing resources and then try to get a baseline of what we're able to accomplish with existing resources. Because at the end of the day, as you all know, we're funded through special funds from our licensees. And so in order to get additional funds for staff, that equates to an increase to our licensing fees. So right now we're trying to use existing resources and then kind of go from there.
Thank you.
I don't see any other raised hands, so we can open it up for public comment.
This is the moderator. We've opened the Q&A panel. If anybody would like to make a comment on this portion of the presentation, please click on the Q&A icon on your screen, type comment into the text field, and submit that to all panelists. All right, seeing no requests, would you like me to close the panel?
Yes, please.
It is closed.
Rob, you know what a fun statistic you should include in the next report is the number of complaints that other boards have to deal with to see how tough our job is. That would be a fun statistic, just for fun. And that, thank you for your report. Thank you for not having any hidden columns in your report.
Thank you.
And we are halfway through our reports and about 7 minutes into our lunch hour. So would the board like to just plow through the lunch hour or hear the reports after the 1 o'clock closed session? Any thoughts? Any opinions?
I would just need
The
a quick.
last two will go very quickly. I'm just letting you know.
So I make the decision.
Well,
I'm going to work through lunch because I always work through lunch. But okay, let's
have a bathroom break at some point.
Okay, let's move on to probation then. If Timothy shows up, I don't know what I'm going to do. It's not
Hi,
Timothy.
doctors. Yes, this is Ginger Gerard. It's good to see you guys. Hope you're all doing well. My report has been given to you folks for your perusal with the stats. I'm very excited to get the full use of the probation office technician as of a couple of weeks ago. And I'm really, really excited to have an analyst starting Monday. And actually, it's going to be a really life-changing thing for me. It's going to be a big difference. I just haven't been able to do stuff that just needs to be done here. And I'm really, thank you guys for whoever was responsible for getting this other analyst. I'm really excited.
It was me. It was me.
Thank you, doctor. I knew it was you.
Yep.
My money was on you.
You're welcome.
And we're just going to be pioneering a probation unit here at the Vet Med Board. It's really exciting. And if you have any questions, that concludes my report, except for questions.
Okay. Any questions for that?
Ginger.
Kathy?
It's very quick, but
Yes, ma'am.
Is it normal, or are our probationers different? So we have, let's see, 36 probationers of our 76 that have had additional complaints against them, which is like 50% almost. Is that like typical?
Well, you know, ma'am,
Don't say ma'am, sorry.
I'm sorry, doctor.
Just call me Kat.
This is the first time as a probation analyst I've had complaints, but I will tell you that a lot of the complaints are in clusters. So some person may have one or two and another person may have, 8 or 9. So yeah, I'm not sure what typical is. I'd say this was not unusual. Some people see that the doctors are placed on probation, and sometimes I get complaints that basically say, you know what, that guy harmed my pet too, and they'll send in a complaint, and it was actually prior to the incidents. It was around the time for the incidents that he or she was placed on probation. So a lot of things can trigger complaints. I think people on probation may actually get more complaints. It could be what the cause or the result of it.
Yeah, just stood out to me. Thanks.
If the last reports are going to be short, would it be okay if we open for public comment after the last reports are given? Okay, then if there's no further questions, then we can move on to hospital inspections. Patty Rodriguez.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Or afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, good. You can hear me. So as Rob has reported, everyone's back in the office, maybe a little staggered because of spacing issues, but it's all hands on deck now. Unfortunately, one of our analysts resigned from state service in May, but she is moving on to some very exciting things, starting her African safari company. So very excited for her. She wanted to follow her dream, and so we fully supported her in that. So her replacement, I'm very excited about her replacement, and that's Miss Ashley Sanchez. So Ashley has been our office technician for the last year, and she is just an exemplary employee and with just outstanding work ethic, and she's a licensed RVT. So she has this just a unique background that we tap into all the time, especially when Dr. Howard is not here, who also is just, I can't say enough good things about Dr. Howard. We love him and we would just be lost without him. So he has to stay put forever. But Ashley has, we had the vacant analyst position, and so she applied for it, and she was promoted recently. So we're excited to have her in her new position. And, looking at everything that we're facing in terms of a workload and the complexity of that workload, the decision was made to make her clerical position, to reclassify it as an additional analyst position for us. So we went ahead and we got approval from HR to do that. And so we have a new analyst that's going to be starting next week, and that's Miss Jennifer Lee, who comes to us from the medical board, where she has been working some of the complaints there. So we're excited to have her start here pretty soon, which is going to leave us with just one clerical support person, but I think it's going to be okay because, as Tim mentioned, the premises licensing process is off of our plates now. Thank you, Tim, for taking it back. And so that's going to free up, that took a lot of time from the two office technicians, and there were a number of emails, and they were basically in constant communication with the applicants, trying to get their premises permits either issued or renewed, or make modifications to them. So with that off of our plate, I think we can we'll be able to handle just having the one clerical position. So we've talked a lot about the inspections merging back to, or going back to their original home and enforcement. And so I won't get into that. We've all heard everything in terms of that, but hoping that in doing that, we build this multidisciplinary team, just really utilizing all the team members' skills and knowledge and their strengths, so that as a collective unit, and to not have this separation between all of us, that we all contribute to the work in different ways, and ultimately the board's mission, right? And just we're going to be depending on what each of those teams brings to the table, but at the same time move forward as a group and make just significant strides in the right direction. Because last year, I like to think of it, when you look at our stats, that it's a rebuilding year. And so then moving forward to the new fiscal year, that we're going to be streamlining things, and that we're going to be moving in the right direction. So and I think as managers, we're trying to figure out what it means to be a leader now in this post-pandemic world. And we've all been operating in this crisis environment. And so now we're just going to be working on inclusion instead of separation between inspections and enforcement. And as leaders, that we're going to continue to be supportive and meeting our staff's needs, whether that's improving our communication, improving training, providing more training, and we've been doing that, doing more one-on-ones, and just being supportive as we navigate this new approach to how we're going to be tackling inspections and enforcement as a whole unit. So that's just what our vision, and looking at it in the next year, so that we can report back that that it's worked. And so we're going to try it. We're going to see how it goes, and just support our team each step of the way. So you guys have already had a chance to hopefully look at the report and the accomplishments, our strategic plan accomplishments. Ongoing always is promoting that self-evaluation checklist. So we'll continue to do that, and along with the inspections, the MDC inspection committee will continue to evaluate that mandate. We're always looking at the whole inspection review process. So the thought is, with Ashley now coming on with giving us her perspective, and with Jennifer also coming in, that we'll have a fresh set of eyes looking at everything, and identifying gaps in how we're going to fill those. Also, we're working on recruiting inspectors, and if you take a look at the last 18 months, we've gone from 16 inspectors just down to 8. So there are some areas where we don't have inspectors. So I'm working on recruiting in those areas to have someone available if we need to go out. And the thought too is that hopefully this maybe this fall, or by the end of the year, that we can gradually start to work on getting the routine inspections done. So just like with everyone else in the profession, some of our inspectors that work full-time have just not been able to be available for their inspector responsibilities, and so they've had to resign. And I understand there's other responsibilities that they have at home and at work. So we've lost quite a few, but now we're working on rebuilding our pool of inspectors, especially in those geographical areas where there's a pretty good need. And again, when you look at our stats, they weren't great for the last fiscal year, but that's something that we hope to improve this fiscal year, and just, you know, utilizing our resources to the extent possible, and that having this bigger team tackle this, that, you know, we'll be able to make significant improvements. So I'll end it there because I know the time's getting, time's a ticking. So if anyone has any questions.
Patty, I know that one of the headlines of this meeting was the merging of the inspection program back into the enforcement program. But I just want you to know that as manager of the inspection program, I think you did a terrific job with a huge task. Hospital inspection is not easy. It's not just going to the hospital and checking off a list.
Right.
Identifying those deficiencies, giving them the opportunity to fix the deficiencies and compliance and inspectors. You were asked to do all of that with no additional resources in the time of a pandemic. So what's admirable to me is that the staff that we have up at the board can identify that things are not working well and work collaboratively to try something different. And that is the dream staff that you want to have. And I look forward to the next report and what you guys can accomplish. So, and thanks, just like I said to Rob, when you see those numbers, thank you for not just throwing in the towel and giving up. Thank you for keep going at it. That's quite admirable.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We appreciate the encouraging words. It's, you know, sometimes they're needed. It's a pretty big mountain that we've got to climb. So, but like, as you said, we've got a dream team. We've got just really fantastic staff here at the board. And so we're, I think we're well equipped.
Okay. Any other questions? And again, I'm going to open up to the public. Jamie, Dr. Nolan?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that, Patty, well done. And I know you guys are, you know, good mountain climbers by now. I just wanted to make a plug. I was a little bit concerned in reading the report that you were looking at considering requiring complete, what was the term you used? I got to find my notes. Complete reports. Oh gosh, excuse me, but I got to find it. Where you say that staff is considering having inspectors prepare detailed narrative reports on all inspections. I just, from my teaching standpoint, and maybe Judy has some idea of this also, when we talk about assessment, when you're in a class, assessment's never complete. It's always spot checking. You know, we spot check students to see if they've been able to assimilate the information. And so I'm going to make another plug at this point for the consideration of developing much more spot check oriented hospital inspections that are not full bore inspections, but that are randomized spot checks, because I think that would help in the mission to provide consumer protection, because you know it's an established protocol to assess in that method, and it helps the hospitals pay attention to all the details because they won't know which ones you're going to be checking, right? And it would also help in the ability to educate them. So I just want to make another plug for that, because I think as we look at our resources and the staff resources, I think it might really be a win-win. So anyway, I thank you for listening.
Yeah, it's certainly something that the MDC inspection committee will look at and discuss. Thank you.
And then Jessica, do you have outreach and a strategic plan? Is that both of you?
I do, and I can do it in less than 5 minutes, I promise.
Starting now.
All right, so outreach members, there's just a couple updates similar to the last report. The association needs part of the strategic plan. We continue to participate in the CARBDA monthly meetings that we set up with them, and also with the Board of Governors meetings. We provide that information to the Board of Governors every quarter. We are reporting on the increased social media presence, and we provided numbers there. And then we also are working with Office of Public Affairs to increase any documents that are to be disseminated out to the consumers and our licensees, so that we did just the recent drive for consumers to let them know when it's too hot for them to walk their pets on the pavement. And so you'll see a couple graphics that they designed for us. And then onto the strategic plan, you'll see that the main difference between this and the last one that you saw is not only the actions, but our target completion dates and the current status of the tasks that we have been able to complete or that are pending. And what you'll see is that there's a lot of objectives there that, although we have completed them because we started doing them, they're going to be ongoing. And so you're going to see a lot of the completed but ongoing, because they should become part of the normal operating procedures. So you're going to see a lot of that. The next strategic plan tracker that you're going to see, we're going to add a little more information under each one that specifically tells you what was done and when, the specific tasks that were accomplished. And then if there's documents that were created, or if there's training or videos that were created that's on our website, we're going to be providing links to those. So this should be an all-inclusive document of everything that the board has accomplished for the strategic plan over the course of time. So it'll be really simple to track. And if you're ever wondering what's been done, you'll have this report every single quarter. And then another thing is, even though you have, say, the first enforcement objective, there's 8 tasks there. What we're finding is, as we go, we find additional ideas to meet that overall goal, and so we'll be adding to it. So this isn't set in stone, but it's just letting you know how we feel we can achieve the goals that you guys have put in place.
My only comment is I still don't see a TikTok page on outreach. We're still working.
We will get you a TikTok page. I will work with the Office of Public Affairs.
All right, very good. Kathy?
Thanks, Jessica. Let me see. Oh, I think the strategic plan document is terrific. Thank you very much. It's very easy to understand. One thing I wondered, might just for those items that are totally completed, I realize many are ongoing, but the ones that are totally completed, could we like strike them, leave them there, but like strike it out so it makes you see that you've actually removed a lot, just in quick glance? I don't know. I just thought it'd be visually, you could actually see, we've actually completed,
Yeah. And actually, we are going to improve this document to make it more identifiable of what's been completed versus what not completed. What I was thinking is actually over the overall goals, the percentage, maybe a little pie chart to the right of how complete each one is, because you have an overall goal, but we have 8 tasks to complete that. So we can do a pie chart to show you, basically like showing how complete we are, and then an overall completion of what's left. Because if you look at all of them, this is a 4-year plan, but it looks like we're set to complete it before that. So
great, thank you.
We'll make it easier to identify the completion.
But it's really great as it is too. Thank you.
Open up for public comments, please, for any questions on the probation, hospital inspection, outreach, and strategic plan report.
This is the moderator. We've opened the Q&A panel. If anyone has a comment on these last few items, please click on the Q&A icon on your screen, type comment into the text field, and submit that to all panelists. And seeing none, would you like me to close the panel?
Yes, please.
It is closed.
And then really quickly for future agenda items, Jessica, I'm not sure if you wrote things down, but I had possible addition of an RVT to the board as a future agenda item. And also an idea about the hospital spot check as opposed to a full hospital inspection checklist. And looking into how to get RVT student representation to participate. Did you have anything else?
Yep, so we'll also be looking at the board approval of the RVT school program. We were looking into that. We met with the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary Education and had preliminary discussions with the legislature. They are open to working with us. What I found, though, is in the research, if we were to just strike out the approval, it would impact how we approve the alternate route program.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so we want to make sure that we are not unintentionally deleting that pathway. So there's a lot of research that has to go into that. So it'll be at the next meeting. We also have the EO evaluation that you guys will be doing in closed session with HR. And then we also have elections of officers in October.
All right.
And
Zach?
probably update on the legal issues that we're dealing with as far as yeah.
Does the public have any, should I open up to the public for future agenda items? Okay, please do so.
This is the moderator. If you'd like to make a comment on the suggestions for future agenda items, please click on the Q&A icon on your screen, type comment into the text field, and submit that to all panelists. First comment comes from Nancy Ehrlich. Nancy, your line is open and you will have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I would like you to consider evaluating the VA CSP program for its value and its efficiency and its necessity. That's
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Nancy.
And seeing no additional requests, would you like me to close the panel?
Yes, please.
It is closed.
Thank you, board members. We will reconvene in 30 minutes for closed session.
And just for the public, will not be coming back on the webcast or opening up to the public after this. So everybody that's going to be remaining are participants of closed session.
Very good.